OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
7:30 on this Tuesday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. Eoin and Neil with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. And we're talking to Martin Lipton, we're talking to Andy Mitten, we are talking to Gareth Roberts this morning as the European SuperLeague story reaches day 3 at this point. Who will be the first one to say chicken? Who will be the first person of the 12 to crack, if that is going to happen today? Will the Glazers, will FSG, will they find some love in their heart to say no thank you to the European Super League? We're expecting developments this morning, this afternoon. And Neil Treacy, I don't think I've watched as much Sky Sports news in 24 hours in about 10 years. Since that transfer deadline day with the purple dildo, I haven't watched this much Sky Sports news in one day.
Yeah, and specifically, Owen, I think you haven't watched that much Sky Sports news without actually watching that much football. Like, I don't think I've watched as much football discourse in comparison to football over the course of whatever, less than 48 hours. We're probably talking 40 hours or so. And even when you said as we started, we're coming on to day 3 of it. Feels like this has been going on like 2 weeks already. Like, the sheer volume of information that has come out, the passion in the arguments that are being made, and God, like I actually felt yesterday evening. I was like yourselves, and I was working early in the morning and late on in the afternoon. I found like every 10 minutes I was checking back in to see, right, what is the latest, because you were getting to a stage where there were so many different exclusives coming out. The Mail would have their own story about these teams might be banned by this Friday. Some other outlet might have a story saying, well, they've been speaking to someone from UEFA who has said this. Another person has spoken to someone from the Premier League. It was so hard to actually keep track of what everybody was saying and what messages were coming out there that I actually decided at one point yesterday afternoon, I was like, right, I'm ditching Super League for like the next 3 or 4 hours. I'll return to it at about 7:30 before the Liverpool Leeds match and just do like a catch up, because the information was changing so much. What you heard at 3:30 was completely out of date by 5 p.m. It felt like, with the various things that were coming in. So I actually thought that was a good way of doing it. Parked it for a little while, watched a little bit of snooker.
All right.
Went out, did the groceries, had my walk, experienced the real world, and then came back and actually just got up to speed with what was happening. But yeah, what a crazy day. And as we mentioned as well in our pre-show chat over the phone, the fact that José Mourinho's sacking, they finally got round to it on Monday Night Football last night at like 10:45. Like, on any other day in the sporting world, José Mourinho being sacked from any job is pretty much the biggest story in the sporting world. And it was a genuine afterthought. Like, that just summed up. Talk about unprecedented times over the last year. Yesterday was an unprecedented day of football discourse.
Yeah, we're going to be joined by Martin Lipton in about 15 minutes' time to talk about José Mourinho. And then I picked up the Sun this morning, and he's got an exclusive on the Big Six facing orders to quit the Premier League. So we'll probably do José Mourinho down the line with Martin Lipton when he's on with us later on. You're right, everybody has a different angle on this. It is one of the most fast developing stories we've ever seen because of the fact that people need to act fast, and it is an emergency in the minds of a lot of people. We saw the reaction on Monday Night Football last night. It was absolutely extraordinary. The latest thing we can bring you this morning is Ollie Holt of the Mail saying that he's hearing the first cracks maybe beginning to appear in the ugly, misshapen edifice of the ESL. Told 2 English clubs are close to losing their nerve. So is this the game of chicken finally starting to wind up a little bit? We'll have to see. Who would you have your money on, Neil, as the person who is losing their nerve in this misshapen edifice of the ESL?
Well, initially, to be honest, I was thinking Manchester United might be the first to crack.
Is that because of Gary Nevin? And the pressure from the fans?
It wasn't. It wasn't. But to be honest, I think that's actually a decent enough point. So I'm going to use that. Yeah, Gary Neville is so passionate about it. No, in fairness, I would have got my thoughts wrong. I was thinking Ed Woodward. I just wouldn't have thought he'd be able to stand up to it when it came down to it. When you have the likes of Bruno Fernandes or some more of the bigger players, if I presume they will speak out against it. And in fairness, he did point out to me before the show that ultimately Ed Woodward is just a man in a suit. Really, he doesn't make the decisions. He implements the decisions of the Glazers, who probably don't give a hoot about it. So that's probably a fair point. Other than that, who would back out? I did find a very good point from Gary Neville actually last night of Man City's involvement, of like ultimately like what are they in this for? Are they just in it because everyone else is in it? Because he kind of made the point that like they're not in this game to make money. They're not in football to become wealthy. They're in it basically to just cleanse their image, to it's sports washing, as we've discussed many times before. They're in this just for the fame and glory, and ultimately it kind of doesn't really fit for their profile, rather than just being involved with the bigger clubs. I certainly don't think Real Madrid are going to crack anytime soon, based off the quotes of the likes of Florentino Perez anyway yesterday, which I know we're going to get to.
Yeah, well, Perez last night did an interview which was as explosive as you might expect. He said the decision was taken in part because young people are no longer interested in the game. That has actually been a conversation that's happened quite a bit over the last few years. Are young people watching full 90-minute matches? The thing is, nobody's saying that these games are not going to be 90-minute matches. I know they'll be against better teams, and you'll have big teams going toe-to-toe a lot more.
Can we rule out any of that? Can we rule out the fact that they're not going to turn this European Super League into some like blitz of 20-minute games? Like, are they just going to completely rip up the playbook altogether and do every team turns up at the new camp on this particular night, and it's like the World Sevens tour, where they play a little mini competition over 2 days on a Tuesday and Wednesday night at the new camp, and then the following week they go to Old Trafford and they do that as well, and they get a bag of potatoes and some Score Cola afterwards as well.
Did we say European Super League? We actually meant European Futsal League. That's actually what we meant. The European FIFA League. Somebody's saying that this could become like FIFA, where you'd have Kevin De Bruyne's music playing as he runs onto the pitch. Like, I'm pretty sure it's still just going to be football. Like, the levels to which some of this thing has been taken to over the last 48 hours has been hilarious. As much as I agree that this is a terrible idea, some of the outrage has also been spectacularly outrageous. It has been the most outrageous outrage I've ever seen. Perez, I think this kind of plays into his point about young people. He says audiences are decreasing and rights are decreasing, and something had to be done. We are all ruined, he said. Television has to change so we can adapt. And then he was asked about players potentially being banned from international competitions and national teams being banned from international competitions by UEFA, basically. And he said, do not worry, this will not happen. They won't be banned if they join the Super League. He added, Real Madrid, Manchester City and Chelsea and the other clubs of the Super League will not be banned from the Champions League or domestic leagues. 100%, I'm sure. Impossible. So maybe one of those clubs who is thinking a little bit about removing themselves from the Big 12 this morning is looking at Florentino Perez's quotes last night and saying, I believe Perez, I'm staying on side. So this is the thing now. There is massive threats coming from it in the Premier League, obviously from Seferin, who is now the body and soul of world football at this point. He is officially the good guy in this fight, Seferin. The battle between him and the likes of Perez.
Oh dear God.
Yeah.
Is this where we are?
Yeah. It's it really is.
A sorry state of affairs when a suit in UEFA is the hero of this.
And I think he's probably made himself even more of a hero after describing Ed Woodward as a snake. I think that was just extraordinary. His press conference yesterday was incredible. His relationship between Andrea Agnelli, just an incredible breakdown in a friendship. The whole Godfather thing is incredible, really. That did Agnelli play Seferin all those years ago when he got him to become godfather to his daughter? Was he thinking, I'm going to stab this guy in the back, this will be a way of lulling him into a false sense of security? There is a deep dive documentary in the relationship between Seferin and Agnelli when this is all done. And then Ed Woodward is just, he's clearly just a man who will blow whatever way he's being told to blow, because as you say, rightly, you can't really trust him to be the person who cracks this morning, because he will answer only to Joel Glazer. Regardless of him showing up at a UEFA meeting last Friday, he will answer to Joel Glazer and he will do whatever he says. And this is my real concern for this, that people think that there might be a massive U-turn coming. I don't think that. You look at the track record of Manchester United and those that own them over the last couple of years, they've commented publicly very little, and rarely if ever, actually, to be honest, when it comes to big issues. So why would they start coming out now to comment, and then by extension why would they come out and actually do a U-turn on all this? I'm not sure they will. So it's probably going to be up to the likes of Daniel Levy to actually find the soul of football in all this, which maybe is a futile exercise in itself. We should go through a bit of what happened last night, because there was fresh audio from Monday Night Football, from those that were actually involved in the game. And we're going to start here with Patrick Bamford. He was speaking after the game and basically hit the nail on the head.
We've just seen pretty much what everyone else has seen on Twitter and stuff, and it's amazing, just like the things that they're talking about. I can't quite comprehend. I mean, it's amazing the amount of uproar as well that comes into the game when somebody's pockets are being hurt. So it's a shame it's not like that with all the things that go wrong at the minute, with racism and stuff like that. But it's just how it is at the minute.
Good point. At times like this, is it a real distraction to players, something like this?
I don't think so. I think it's something that we talk about, but once you get on the pitch, you're not thinking about what's going on outside the ground and things like that. It's just we're like fans really, and everyone else just can't believe it and talking about it, don't know what's going to happen, and in shock. Yeah,
he's right. It's amazing what happens when the pockets of people are actually being impacted. Now, if you didn't stay up for the hour after the match last night, it was dominated by Jurgen Klopp. He had a cut at Gary Neville in his post-match interview, and afterwards Jamie Carragher sent a warning to the owners that this better not lead to Klopp leaving Anfield.
If that man left Liverpool or had a fallout with the owners over this, Liverpool support would have those owners out within a week. I'm convinced of it. They would rip that stadium down. That man is the most powerful man at Liverpool Football Club. Don't anyone from outside think, because Liverpool haven't had the greatest season, they've had problems here, Klopp's had a few spiky interviews all season, people are questioning him. Do not think for 1 minute that there's one Liverpool supporter anywhere that doesn't want him to manage Liverpool for the next 3 or 4 years. They do.
And then here is Jurgen Klopp a little bit later on speaking about his own future.
I will do that as long as people let me do that. That's how it is. So I really would not, it's not the situation I heard today that I will resign or whatever. So that if the times get even tougher, whatever, that makes me more that makes me more sticky that I stay here. So it's just like that. I feel responsible for the team. I feel responsible for the club, and I feel responsible for the relationship we have with our fans. And that's why it's a very tough time, I'm sure. But I will try to help to sort it somehow.
Yeah, I think a lot of us actually expected Jurgen Klopp to go no comment and to go down the Thomas Tuchel line of responses yesterday, because it's really hard to speak up on something when you know your employers are probably listening. So fair play to him for taking a line on it. Not an overly strong line, but a line on it, because that's difficult. That's really tough to be in his position and actually just say something on the matter that isn't completely wishy-washy a la Tuchel yesterday. And I can't really blame Tuchel either, because he knows who his bosses are. But fair play to Jurgen Klopp, fair play to James Milner. It is 7:43 AM. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Will O'Callaghan, how are you?
Morning, Owen. How are things?
Good. Now, I presume that this is just like a constant rolling thread on your own feed, trying to keep on top of the Super League this morning?
Yeah, effectively. And Jurgen Klopp, as you mentioned, speaking last night, saying he hopes that the European Super League will never happen. Fan protests outside the planned breakaway at Elland Road last night, where his side drew against Leeds 1-1 in the Premier League. Sadio Mane finally getting back on target, scoring his first goal in 10 games. But Leeds got a deserved equaliser late on through Llorente. Liverpool are among the 12 founder members of the European Super League. Klopp says he's yet to discuss the plans with the club's owners, but he has ruled out resigning from his position in the audio clip we just heard. That draw saw Liverpool miss out on the chance to move into the Premier League's top 4. Tonight, Chelsea can go up to 3rd if they can beat Brighton at Stamford Bridge. That one kicks off at 8 p.m. The Premier League, meanwhile, will be holding an emergency meeting later. The 14 clubs not involved in the Super League will be considering what happens next. UEFA will be looking at what legal action they can take against the sides, which could include, according to one of their executive board members yesterday, potentially kicking the 12 teams out of European competition, which would mean Man City and Chelsea not being in the Champions League semi-finals, and Manchester United and Arsenal potentially being kicked out of the Europa League also at the last 4 stage. President Alexander Shefrin has also threatened to ban players from representing their countries at major tournaments. He indicated yesterday that those bans could kick in as early as this summer's Euro 2020. Here at home, Jim Magilton will be taking interim charge of Dundalk for their trip to Derry in the Premier Division of the Treacy League this evening. The Lily Whites are without a manager following the departures of Shane Keegan and Filippo Giovagnoli in recent days. On off the ball at the weekend, Vinnie Perth Roberts said he would be potentially interested in going back to the hot seat at Oriel Park. Elsewhere this evening, reigning champion Shamrock Rovers are away to Drogheda. St. Pat's, who are yet to taste defeat this term, will host Waterford. Sligo Rovers travel to Dalymount to face Bohemians, and you've got Longford against Finn Harps. In the Championship, Norwich will lift the title with the win at home to second place Watford this evening. They were promoted at the weekend, the Canaries. Swansea can move within 3 points of the automatic promotion places if they can beat QPR. Just in the last couple of moments, we've had the draw for the Leinster Football Championship, the most competitive, of course, of the provincial championships over the last decade. The first round of the Leinster Senior Footballs, this is a preliminary round effectively, is Offaly against Louth, Wicklow against Wexford, and Carlow will play Longford. The quarterfinals then, Kildare await the winners of Offaly and Louth. Dublin's bid for 7 in a row will begin against Wicklow or Wexford. Laois will play Westmeath in the Midlands Derby, and then Meath await the winners of Carlow and Longford. The Ulster football pairings, which of course will be far more competitive on a serious note, will be known after the draw in the Northern Province, which is made this evening. Last night, defending Connacht football champions Mayo were handed a quarter-final date with Sligo. The winners of that one will play against Leitrim. The other semi-final is Roscommon against Galway. Leinster will be without their captain Johnny Sexton for their Rainbow Cup opener against Munster this weekend. The Ireland out half has been stood down. He's continuing to go through the return to play protocols, while a decision on Jameson Gibson Park's fitness will be made later in the week. Leo Cullen has also indicated that Tadhg Furlong is closing in on a central contract with the IRFU. For Ulster, they could have Ian Henderson back for their Interpro derby with Connacht. He has stepped up his recovery from the shoulder injury sustained against England in the Six Nations and is back in contention to play this weekend. And finally, Eoin and Neil. Mark Allen will begin his World Snooker Championship journey this morning. The Antwerman takes on world number 56, Liu Hai Chan, at the Crucible. On the other table, Jack Liskowski will resume 5-4 against Ali Carter. John Higgins rolled back the years last night, an incredible fight back to beat Chiang Fen-Fei 10 frames to 7. Anthony McGill is also into the second round, where he'll face the defending champion Ronnie O'Sullivan. It's after McGill beat Ricky Walden by 10 frames to 5.
Will O'Callaghan, great stuff. You'll be with us later to bring us up to speed on the Ulster Football Championship right at 7:47 a.m. Let's tell you what's coming up on OTB AM this morning. OTB AM, by the way, live in association with Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle today ahead. Martin Lipton on standby. He'll be with us in just a moment. Andy Mitten and Gareth Roberts then will be with us after 8 o'clock to give the Liverpool and Manchester United fan perspective on what has happened over the last couple of days. The sports page is dominated by that very story coming your way at 8:30. And the sports news with Will O'Callaghan when he's back with us at 8:45. And that GAA draw will be top of the agenda there. The Tight Five with Neil at 9:05 this morning as we look back on Ireland against France and a little bit on the Rainbow Cup as well. The European Super League is not the only new competition in town. Let us not forget about the Rainbow Cup. And then Pat Nevin at 9:30 this morning. He was in conversation with Joe Malloy last night. Right, it is time to stick with the European Super League. Martin Lipton of The Sun is with us. Good morning, Martin.
Good morning.
You're writing on the back page of The Sun this morning, it's carried in the Irish Sun, that the Big Six face orders to quit the Premier League by their rivals. What is the latest on this and how realistic is it?
Well, there's a meeting of the 14 Premier League rump today being convened by Richard Masters, who's the chief executive. They are furious, angry, incandescent, pick your adjective, and some of them are vowing revenge. Personally, I think it would be both a difficult and indeed retrograde step. First of all, under the Premier League rules, you need to expel a club, you need a 3/4 majority. Now, my maths isn't great, but 14 is one short of a 3/4 majority. I can't see any of the six voting to expel themselves, so that's not going to happen. But also, more pertinently, if you get rid of the Big Six and replace them with the top six in the Championship, and then you go to Sky and BT in October, as the Premier League is planning to do, to start negotiating the new TV contract, do you really think you're going to get £1.7 billion a year? Or even close? If you're lucky, you've got a third of your value in the market, if you're lucky. So therefore, wiser heads, I'm sure, will prevail. But that doesn't mean that the anger and indignation isn't righteous and justifiable. If you've been left out of this plot, you're going to be furious, and rightly so.
Correct. Like, I mean, we should leave that aside just for one moment, that the fact whether or not this is right or wrong. But you raise a really valid point there. The realistic ability of the Premier League to actually have influence on this is nowhere near what UEFA might be able to do. UEFA, with their international control, may be able to stop players playing for their country. We'll see what the legal standing is on this. But the Premier League will actually end up cutting off their nose to spite their face if they end up kicking out the big six.
Yeah, it doesn't make any strategic or economic sense. I mean, the problem, of course, is that even if the big six stay, if this project Super League gets off the ground, and we have Perez saying last night in that strange interview he gave at about midnight that he's looking to launch as soon as August. If not, then they will wait a year. There will be a flight of the money into the Premier League. I think people are telling me that even with the big six, a Super League would mean that the Premier League TV rights could drop by a third, because that will be the new attraction for money. It will be the big pool. There's only a finite pot, and Super League will take a bigger share of it than the Champions League does. So that will be a concern. But Premier League has got to try to do everything it can to maintain its appeal. And the reality is, as Ian Ayres said a few years ago, and it was horrible when he said it, but it's absolutely true, without the big teams, there is no league.
There has been some suggestion this morning, Martin, that one or two of the big clubs may now be wavering in their belief in the Super League. Would that then give the Premier League, I guess, the courage to actually go ahead and ban them? I know that they're not going to get 15 votes, but I think you're also reporting that Richard Masters essentially has an ability to supersede all of that and actually just pull the trigger himself. It's somewhere in the rule book. It may not happen.
Rule B11 gives the board, which is Masters, Hoffman and Kevin Beeston, the power, absolute discretion to act as they see fit. But they've never expelled a club before, and I genuinely don't see that as being a viable move for them. It doesn't make any sense, because also the repercussions would be enormous, and the legal threat that would follow. And were the Premier League to lose that case, then can you imagine the costs? It would bankrupt the league. So the smart move is what they can do under the rule book, which is to withhold permission for the six to play in another competition. But then again, that would itself, I suspect, be put to test in a restraint of trade case being brought by the six, who are, as private companies, have the right to act in their own best interest. Indeed, have a legal and fiduciary right to improve the lot of the shareholder, to add shareholder value. So there's lots of issues that will come into it.
Martin, if the Premier League's hands are tied on all of this, how big is the player power going to be, and the impact of the more important managers in the Premier League, the ones that really have the legacy and standing, like Klopp and Pep Guardiola, probably more so than Ole Gunnar Solskjaer?
I would be amazed if Pep Guardiola says anything, given that Barcelona and Manchester City, two clubs closest to his heart, are involved in this. Klopp was in a difficult position last night, and he decided that rather than actually saying what he believed, he'd turn on Gary Neville. I don't think it was a particularly smart play, but there you go. Klopp doesn't believe in this concept clearly. He thinks it's wrong. There is a danger, I think, if Bayern Munich stay out, that this gives him an excuse to leave Liverpool and go to Bayern Munich, but we will see. I'm not sure that's necessarily in his mind at the moment. We heard players last night. We heard Bamford, we heard Milner, we've seen tweets from the likes of Podence and Bruno Fernandes and others. But this is all based on this threat from UEFA in particular and FIFA to ban the players from international football. The clubs simply don't believe it. They think it's an empty threat. And their argument is, OK, do that. And when you go to market the World Cup and say to Budweiser and Coke and McDonald's, we've got this brilliant tournament with all the world's countries taking part. Oh, no, we haven't got Messi and we haven't got Ronaldo. No, we haven't got Kane and we haven't got Salah. No, I haven't got Mbappe. No, but we've got the bloke who plays for Atalanta and the midfielder.
Yeah.
Where's that argument going to get? Where's that money going to come from?
Well, it would mean that Ireland would win the World Cup, so it would be great.
Well, there you are, that's brilliant.
It's a really interesting point, though, Martin, because that's where the divide between UEFA and FIFA might start to emerge. We were making this point yesterday morning that if one of the two big governing bodies is going to come on side with the Super League, it's probably going to be FIFA. UEFA at least have to protect the Champions League, but FIFA, as you rightly say, they're just thinking about the World Cup.
And also the Club World Cup, which is probably more important. I don't know if you remember, I did an interview couple of months ago with Javier Tebas, who accused Infantino of orchestrating this breakaway plot with Perez. He said straight out, he said, this is Perez and Infantino. Infantino will be speaking to the UEFA Congress in the next hour and a half. He has told Alexander Ceferin that he's going to back him and fully supports UEFA's stance and is utterly opposed to this Super League project. But the FIFA statement that came out just before midnight on Sunday was, at best, limp, tepid, wishy-washy. It was not the full-throated condemnation of the plans that UEFA were anticipating and expecting. And there's an awful lot of interest now in what Infantino says in the pulpit of the UEFA Congress, because if he goes soft on Super League, the clubs who already think he's leaving the door ajar will believe he's left it wide open.
That's game, set and match, Martin, really, isn't it? This Infantino stance.
Certainly change everything. And the argument being that Infantino has always wanted to emasculate UEFA, loathes Ceferin, really hates the pact that Ceferin has formed with Dominguez in South America, and would love to put him away. Also, by encouraging a Super League project, it gives credibility to his World League scheme and also his Club World Cup. Now, I'm not sure whether this is true. I'm not saying that it's fact, but this is the allegation, the insinuation, the fear of some that actually Infantino may be the game changer in the wrong way. What he says, as I said, in about an hour and a half, will be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it really is. It's going to be key. Like, then it comes down to what might happen within. If any of the Big 12 can find it within themselves to publicly say, actually, you know what, we're wavering a little bit on this, or we're changing our mind. Do you see that as likely at all? And if so, Martin, who do you think might be the most likely to do so?
Well, we know that Chelsea and City were reluctant followers rather than leaders of this. Even on Sunday, I was being told that City were the last to sign up. And you could argue, well, didn't they have the courage of their convictions? Well, no. The problem was fear of missing out. But nobody wants to miss out. They don't want to turn their back on a share of £4.6 billion. And I'm not sure that any of them, having come this far, can individually pull out. Now, maybe if there's a caucus across three countries that do, it'd be different. But Real Madrid, Perez has nailed his colours to the mast last night. We believe that Atletico and Barcelona were in line with them. Agnelli can't change his position unless he gets booted. But, unless Juventus boot Agnelli, they're absolutely all in. Even Gazidis is a senior plotter at Milan. Inter also in. Liverpool United drove this, so they're not going to pull out. Who are you looking at? Spurs and Arsenal need it to keep solvent. Not quite as bad as that, but look at the money that the Spurs have lost because of more than anyone, because they get £6 million a match in income revenue from games. This would fill a huge void. They're going to get £200 million straight up, plus £130 million a year, whether they win or lose any game. Even if they lose every game, it's £130 million. Plus, for Tottenham, this is £55 million extra revenue through the gate every season.
And we do want to talk specifically about Tottenham for footballing reasons, obviously, after yesterday, but just one on them in the Super League. Like, if Tottenham fans were a little bit annoyed by this, Martin, that the very existence of the Super League might be coming over the next couple of months, they'll be doubly pissed off when they see that they're actually the butt of everybody's jokes, that everybody making barbs about the Super League online is saying, what are Spurs doing in here?
Well, the Spurs were in the Champions League final 18 months ago.
Yeah,
Spurs, which were the first team in England to win a European competition and have won more European competitions than Man City and Arsenal. That's Spurs.
Yeah. I'm just saying what people are saying online, Martin. Just the trolls on Twitter.
If we all listened to what people said online, we'd never get out of bed, would we?
But people are saying they haven't won a league since 1961.
1961, I know, this is true. But they've also been in the top four. They've beaten every team in the league in terms of positions in the last 3 years. They've been in the top 6 for 10 years running. They've been in the top 4 for most of those years. They've been second and third. They've been in European finals. And also, more pertinently, and this is what it boils down to, they're the 8th richest club in the world.
I think that's the bullseye right there. Neil, go ahead.
Yeah, Martin, I suppose we might actually just flip it onto the news of José Mourinho yesterday.
Oh, no!
incredibly buried by the Super League news. I suppose there's a couple of strands on it. it was probably something we all expected was going to happen at some point in the next few months. Were you surprised, though, that it was yesterday, a few days out from a cup final, and not at a later stage during the summer?
Yeah, for me, the surprise is the timing, not the fact. I think it become inevitable now that it couldn't last. Things were falling apart. The centre cannot hold, and as famous Irishman once wrote. And the truth is that there was nothing there anymore. The board, I'm told, were increasingly worried and concerned. There were issues about discipline within the squad in terms of commitment to the team and the club that they blamed the manager for. And performances have been ropey at best, shocking in the main part. The view within the board was that something had to be done. It couldn't be changed without significant alteration. The only obvious change is to get rid of the manager in these circumstances. The belief is that this will allow Delhi and Bale to come back into the fold immediately, because they're still two good players who shouldn't be being wasted and left on the sidelines. They think that this will galvanise the squad and maybe allow them to pull off some sort of freak result against City on Sunday and still get into the top 6 for Europe if they're not banned by UEFA for next season.
Yeah, I think almost any conversation about getting into Europe now has a little asterisk beside it when we're going through it. But is there an element that it was just giving themselves enough little wiggle room left in the season that, as you can kind of say, they can hopefully get some kind of a bounce? And could that be enough maybe to keep Harry Kane at the club over the summer?
I think that my belief, and I know nothing on this, my belief is that what they will do is bid a sad but fond farewell to Hugo Lloris and say to Harry Kane, here is X extra per year, and we want you to be captain, and give it one more year. And if you feel the same, then we understand. But we need also, because if you give it one more year, you have the ideal platform to become the record scorer in Tottenham's history, supplanting Jimmy Greaves, because he's only 30 odd behind, and he scores 40 goals a season in all competitions. So that may be their push. And who knows, with a new manager, and I think Nagelsmann is absolutely number one choice. He's the one they want. Whether they can get him is another matter, but they're obviously going in now to try and get him before Bayern Munich do. It will be interesting if Nagelsmann turns down Munich to join Spurs and Klopp then takes the opportunity to go to Bayern, but we will see. But they need... Kane is huge. They can't afford to lose him because of what it will say about the ambitions and status of the club. They know that. At the same point, I think a lot of Spurs fans who would be horrified to see Harry Kane go would not blame him if he tried to. But so far, he hasn't forced the issue at all. And that will be the hope. Well, I would say, of course, as a warning to Tottenham fans, is Daniel Levy's first act as chairman was to sack a manager to try to keep the star player. Within 3 months, Sol Campbell had gone to Arsenal on a free transfer.
That's a prospect and a half.
I'm not saying that Harry Kane's going to go to Arsenal, by the way, but
you just leave that hanging out there.
But it is a fact that he got rid of Graham, brought in Glenn Hoddle, got rid of George Graham, brought in Glenn Hoddle, believing that would keep Campbell, and he didn't.
You mentioned Nagelsmann there. Obviously, the timing of this sacking is coming just a couple of days after Hansi Flick confirmed that he's going to be leaving at the end of the season. Do you think that played a part, that they saw what was happening at Bayern Munich, the fact that probably their long-term target was going to be looked at as well for a job like Bayern Munich, and they felt like they had to kind of move quick? I'm
sure it's a factor. In addition to the fact that performances have dropped off a cliff, the Everton performance, despite the result, was terrible. The Man United performance, second half, was abysmal. So it's a combination of factors. But yeah, if Nagelsmann's the one you want and you feel you might lose him, then you may have to make an early move. And Dave Kidd, in my paper today, says that they could even install the German by the end of the season. That isn't inconceivable. I'm sure if they really, really want, that's their plan A, and they throw enough money at it, it is possible, yes.
Have you thought about the context of Harry Kane's future when it comes to the Super League, Martin? Like, does that make him more or less likely to stay if there's a Super League come August?
Well, if there's a Super League, there's only 11 clubs it can go to, isn't there?
Yeah.
And I don't think he'd leave. I genuinely do not believe that Daniel Levy would sell Harry Kane to another English club, so he can only go abroad. Theoretically, it might make it more likely, because Real and Barcelona, who obviously are somewhat cash-strapped, might suddenly believe they've got more money they can afford to spend. Who knows? I mean, it's a bit of a difficult argument to discuss because we genuinely don't know whether this is going to happen. And we know that Perez has said it could start in August. I find that difficult to believe, in truth, because I'm not sure they get the deals over the line in 4 or 5 months. But this is a rapidly evolving situation and scenario, which means that anything you say in the moment could be completely out of date by the end of the day. So it's a bit too fluid at the moment, to be truthful.
By the end of the hour, Martin, to be quite honest with you, every single minute is important at the moment. Just one last one then. José, where does he finish up from studying him closely over the last couple of seasons? Where does he go next?
I genuinely don't know. I don't think another English club will take him. I think that's gone. So he's still revered in Portugal. Could he go back to Porto one day? Could he do Benfica and, go back to where it effectively started for him when he only lasted a year before he quit? Could he take the Portugal job after the Euros? He's 58. Does he fancy that sort of thing? I don't think he'll want an international football job yet. I think he'll still want a club job. What would that be? He's still revered at Inter, but that's gone. But maybe he could be the man to revive Juventus if they feel that they need a change. Maybe Marseille might decide that he's an option. I genuinely don't know, but I can't see another English club taking him. What I would say is that he has behaved in a way that I didn't expect at Tottenham. When it was all falling apart, he's actually been, by his standards, very well behaved. He hasn't, I don't think, gone on the mad assault and an aggressive stance that he did at Chelsea and United when it was falling apart. But it didn't stop it falling apart. And it looks like the lust of the magic has waned and maybe gone for good. We can't forget what an astonishing managerial figure he was for the first 15 years of his career. Truly remarkable, and did things that very few have been capable of doing. So for me to see him somewhat diminished has been quite sad, because I remember there were moments when I saw the twinkle and the glint in the eye, but they weren't there for long enough. And he did look reduced in the last few months, almost as if he was bringing this on himself because he doesn't really enjoy it anymore, and he used to love it.
Yeah, it's pretty sad actually. He seems to have mellowed in both a positive and a negative way, it seems, over the last little while. Martin, great stuff as ever. Thanks a million for taking the call this morning.
No worries, take it. Bye-bye.
Martin Lipton there of The Sun, and reporting this morning that the Big Six are in trouble when it comes to the Premier League at the moment. Could they actually make the move to banish them from the league? If it goes to a vote, they probably won't be successful in doing that, considering they'll need 15 votes. But could Richard Masters actually use his superpowers and actually push them out of the division? We've got loads of reaction to what's been happening over the last couple of days. Wayne Ryan has been in touch to say Bielsa to Spurs as predicted. Bobby says Bielsa is the most underrated manager ever. Riverwolf says footballers were disgustingly paid too much for too long. They only have themselves to blame. Adam Fahy then says MUFC, Manchester United Financial Corporation. Mark then says, if you want a real snooze fest, just watch the so-called Super Six play each other, which is a very good point, actually. A lot of those games between the Big Six this year have been terrible. Shane says, it's City and Chelsea. They don't need the money as much as the other clubs. Frank Brennan, I think Shane's making the point there, they could be the two that actually are going to waver on this. Frank Brennan says, the English Premier League was founded in 1992, all because of, yes, that's right, greed and money, and this new European Super League is a logical and natural follow-on from this 30 years later. The Premier League has been grossly overhyped and grossly overrated, since it's always been about 14 clubs happy to take the Sky money and then basically just make up the numbers year after year. Daniel says it's UEFA who will die. They are in danger of extinction. Well, if UEFA die and they are irrelevant and they lose this argument, then the Super League, you would imagine, is going to become a reality. So UEFA's role is critically important in this. Kisby says the Super League won't even be a recognised trophy under UEFA. It'll be like a friendly trophy that nobody will care about, unless, of course, all the big players are there and they are allowed to represent their country as well, and they get it all their way. Owen Scully says what's next is Manchester United versus Real Madrid, played in the US and streamed in Europe at 4 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Very realistic possibility. Keego says, get off your high horse, lads. I'm not sure you know what football is about. Fair enough. Rory says, if you can't see the difference between the ugliness and commerciality of modern football and the death nail that is the proposed Super League, then that's not the lad's problem. Rob Walker says it's all about the money. And Bobby says it's more like the Super Bailout League. And then Easel says, sick of Super League, would prefer to hear Neil Treacy tell us who would be his signatory clubs in a rugby version and who would be the holdout. Presumably also a French team due to hosting a World Cup next. Might get into that in the Tide 5 a little bit later on, Neil.
Possibly, yeah. God, that was tough listening to those comments. There was a lot of reality checks. There was a lot of doom and gloom put in there. That was a difficult couple of minutes sitting there listening to that. Might just kind of, like, honest to God, some of it was just depressing reality. A couple of things to touch on. I'm seeing a lot of comparisons with like how the Premier League was formed and Sky's role in that, and I honestly think that argument is getting a little bit too much airtime. If you compare what the Premier League was and like the idea of the Premier League and how it evolved and got to where it is now today, if you compare that to the proposed Super League, like they're two completely different things, realistically. Like the Premier League in comparison to the Super League genuinely just looks like more of a rebrand of what was there. Like they still retain promotion. All they were doing was it became a slightly smaller division with a new trophy, and it was just marketed a hell of a lot better and sold better so that the money was coming in. The Super League is basically picking a handful of, like, a select bunch of clubs and starting up a new competition just for them. And they among themselves will be able to decide who gets to play in it year on year, who are going to be these 5 invited clubs to come in and join them. Yeah. At least in the Premier League, you still had your 3 teams getting promoted, your 3 teams getting relegated each season. Yeah, this is way more dramatic. There's no question about that. It is at 13 minutes past 8, and we've got a packed show still to come on OTB AM. We've got GAA and rugby coming up a little bit later on in the show, but up next, we're uniting the rivalry. Both Andy Mitten, football writer and founder of United We Stand, and Gareth Roberts of the Anfield Wrap will join us to talk about this Super League.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. Off the ball.
And he also said to ask him about the Hummer golf buggy I saw him driving in Portugal.
Yeah, well, the Hummer golf buggy, it wasn't mine, it was a friend of mine's, and I rented his place, and that was his buggy to get about, so yeah, it was interesting. I was trying to keep my head down at times, but it was a little bit, yeah. Not sure what Rick Keane would have made of it.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Check out the Boyle Sports app today for details on which football match is getting the no-lose treatment this week. Plus, browse through dozens of new player markets, all powered by Opta. Shots on target, left foot, right foot, headed goals, assists and more. See the Boyle Sports app for full T's and C's. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Gamble responsibly. See gamblingcare.ie 18+.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
You're welcome back. It is 8:15. We are sticking with the European Super League for the next half an hour or so, and I'm delighted to welcome Andy Mitten of United We Stand and Gareth Roberts of the Anfield Wrap to the show. Good morning, lads.
Morning.
Gareth, we might just start with you. You were obviously watching your team play last night. Were you encouraged by what you heard coming from the likes of Jurgen Klopp and James Milner, at least?
Encouraged, not particularly. Surprised, not either. Jurgen Klopp's come out before and said he does not like the idea of a Super League and that he does support the idea of the Champions League. Equally, from everything I've heard, you know, the players, the manager, staff at Liverpool Football Club found out the same way the rest of us did, via the news, via social media. You know, there was no preempting of this from Liverpool's owners to the staff, which in itself, for me, is a problem. It is a poor way to treat the people that work for you, to use business language which they seem very fond of. Where is the stakeholder management? Fans are stakeholders in the club. People who work for it are stakeholders in the club, as are the manager, as are the players, and none of them are being told about this. And this is a surprise to everyone, it seems, bar people who were in Boston, who were absentee anyway, who clearly don't get the values of Liverpool Football Club.
Is the sense that Jurgen Klopp can make the right noises, but the influence he'll have is actually just going to be limited? Is that where maybe your worries lie?
Yeah, I mean, well, you say his influence is limited. I think he is well loved among Liverpool fans for obvious reasons. He won us a European Cup. He won us the league after all of these years. And he is someone who gets Liverpool Football Club's values. We feel very aligned to him. Every time the man speaks, he talks a lot of sense. He's talked a lot of sense about the city, about the people, about the politics and everything else. And then the owners, much less so. So if Klopp felt it was in his power to, you know, if he felt it was necessary, to walk away as a consequence of all what is going on, I think you'd see people on the streets, you'd see protests, you'd see people at the ground, you know, all of the things that we've seen under the last regime of owners, which seems a long, long time ago, and which I thought we were now beyond. But perhaps not. So Klopp has a lot of power there. Milner too. It was good to just see him blatantly come out and say, well, it's not for me, I don't want it, I hope it doesn't happen. I think more players and managers across the league should use that power, should say they don't want it, should say that this isn't for them and that it isn't about the fans, and it should be about the fans. And we've already seen a little bit of that with Leeds players last night. So it's in their power. They get a microphone put in front of the face, as me and Andy are now, and you've got to come out and say what you think about it and be honest. And I thought Jurgen Klopp was honest, and I thought James Milner was too.
And do you think there is a chance that Klopp walks over this?
I mean, we shall see. He said a couple of cryptic things, which I think you can sort of interpret either way, really. I don't think he wants to, because he feels allied to what he's created there, to his staff, to his coaches, to the players, to us as fans, as I said before. So it would be an extreme thing to do, but I wouldn't completely rule it out either. I mean, it's basically a change of contract, isn't it? I mean, in any other sort of working environment, if you came in one day and then the next day it was totally different what you were being asked to do and what your job was, you would feel concerned about the future, and I imagine he feels concerned too. So we'll have to, with the rest of it, really, we'll have to see how it all unfolds.
Andy Mitten, a very good morning to you as well. What was your initial reaction when you started to realise that this was becoming a very real thing over the course of Sunday evening?
It was Sunday afternoon. I was about to write about Manchester United trying to beat Burnley for the first time in years at Old Trafford when it started to break through, and my first reaction was a negative one, and I tweeted out that nothing in football is permanent. You know, Leeds United, Manchester City have both been in the third division within the last 10, 20 years. You have clubs who've won the European Cup, such as Red Star Belgrade, such as FC Porto. I couldn't understand why no teams from the EU's two biggest economies and countries, France and Germany, had allegedly signed up to the proposed league. It just didn't stack up to me, and fortunes can swing wildly. And one point I made was, and this was just my very first reaction, I remember in '88 Manchester United having to pay AC Milan to come to Old Trafford to play a friendly game because Milan were the top dogs. Manchester United, you know, average crowds 38,000, were far from the top dogs. Hadn't won the league since 1967 in England. And I think one of the great attractions about sport is that teams can rise so high and sink so low. I mean, it's sad for Sunderland fans at the moment that they're in the third division, but it also adds to the story around football. It makes it so compelling when teams rise up and go down. And then Manchester United and Liverpool, part of the reason they're the most two popular clubs certainly in the UK, probably in Ireland, is because their history is tinged with triumph and tragedy. You know, Manchester United were relegated in 1974 because they deserved to be relegated. And I think if you start protecting that, it's a very dangerous game to play. And I think you've seen the reaction to the proposed Super League, not just from Manchester United fans. I mean, I did a survey yesterday on my personal Twitter, and I think 20-odd thousand people voted, and 87% of people were strongly against it. But also from fans of other clubs, I'm seeing exactly the same sentiments coming out from Liverpool supporters. Interestingly, when I look on the continent, it is slightly different. I see Barca and Madrid fans in Spain not liking the idea, but certainly not up in arms as they are in England. The fundamental for me is that it's born out of one thing, which is money and greed. And as Gareth touched on, by people who I don't think have got the best interests of football. They're only interested in the bottom line. I didn't like it when the Glazers took over Manchester United in 2005. I don't think that takeover should ever have been allowed to happen, that highly leveraged takeover. And yet it's still happening. Burnley were taken over under very similar circumstances this year, but because it's Burnley, it didn't get the coverage of Manchester United. I know Liverpool fans have had major issues with their owners, the owners before the current ones. I know that on the field, Liverpool have been very successful under the current owners, but as a model, I just don't like it. I just don't like some of the Americanisms, which I think can be imprinted on European football clubs, which are rooted in their communities in a way that sports franchises, and I hate that word, are not in the US. I remember being in America 20 years ago and reading a brilliant piece of journalism about how the Cleveland Browns had been moved from Cleveland. One of the best books I ever read was about how the Brooklyn Dodgers had been moved from Brooklyn. And I'm just thinking, you know, imagine moving Manchester United from Manchester, or Liverpool from Liverpool. It's just beyond offensive. You know, I get that both of these clubs have got huge global support, and I'm proud of that huge global support. And that goes through thick and thin. I remember being in Helsinki Airport 2013 on my way home from watching Man United playing in a pre-season in the Far East, and seeing someone in a Liverpool tracksuit. And I think he worked for the club, and he was on his way back from Melbourne. And he told me that Liverpool had just played a friendly in front of 90,000 people. Liverpool finished 7th that season, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, that is an incredible number of people. You can't accuse them people of being glory hunters, because Liverpool hadn't won the league for a while. And I'm not saying that facetiously. You know, Liverpool have got an incredible history. And it just smacks of greed. The people behind it, that 6 of the 15 are from England, shows the worry which continental clubs have. Barcelona and Real Madrid and Atletico, they've got significant financial problems. They're looking for someone to save them financially. I sense that some clubs have been coerced into this because they feel that if they don't join it, they will be left out. They won't have a golden ticket. But look at the backlash, not just from the authorities. I don't have that much sympathy with the authorities or the rights holders, because they're all they've got vested interests. My sympathy is with the fans, and already the fans get a raw deal, and already the match-going fans get a raw deal. And the match-going fans have gone from being seen as being the loyal, the hardcore, to being a minority. And decisions are already made on their behalf because of the power of television, and television would have more power in this case, so that you get situations where clubs like United and Liverpool play away games at Crystal Palace, and the game finishes after the last train back to Manchester or Liverpool. They do not care about the fans who go to the games. They just go, whatever. But the fans who go to the games, they're in the 1%. They're in the absolute minority. Most Manchester United and Liverpool fans around the world, they don't really care either, because they're not at the matches. It's not an issue for them. They're not bothered about atmosphere, ticket allocations. But for the match-going fans, these issues are really important. And the league wants to fill a stadium with fans, and I just see uproar among supporters.
Is it not those match-going fans, Andy, that are going to need to make their voice heard the loudest? Because it may be the global fan who isn't travelling to Anfield or to Old Trafford every single week, pre-pandemic that may feel, you know what, I want to see how the Super League actually goes. It is up to the people based near the grounds to actually make this protest happen, to actually try and stop this from happening.
Yeah, that's where the protest will come. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw some cross-club protest, even between Manchester United and Liverpool fans. That would be a first, but I think they've got so much alignment here where the strength of feeling is very similar. It's laced with politics, as it always is. There was a huge schism developed after the Glazer takeover, where you had 4,000 hardcore Manchester United fans walk and form FC United. Among them, the most politically minded Manchester United fans. That caused huge divisions. And one problem for the fan bases of these clubs is that they're not united. There's so many divisions and cliques and suspicions. And I often say no one hates Man United fans more than Man United fans themselves. And it hasn't always been like that. And I know there are similar issues at City and at Liverpool. And it's that divide and rule which has helped people and the authorities get into this position. There has been some progress, I've got to say. Ticket prices for away games, £30. I could never have seen that come in. But in Europe, where a lot of this Super League will obviously be played out, you still get the rip-offs. Barca charged United and Liverpool fans €120 for the worst seat in Camp Nou, only last year and the year before. Sevilla, €100. They're so out of touch. And that's under UEFA's watch as well. So I'm not going to say poor UEFA being left out of this, because there's massive room for improvement under their governorship.
Gareth, I'm curious to know how you felt watching Liverpool last night, because there had been such a huge backlash from fans. You had quite a lot of people talking about how they'd gladly walk away from their own clubs, you know, if this was to go ahead. And I imagine a lot of that is just down to the emotion of the day and stuff like that, and the shock of the announcement. But I'm sure a lot of the suits at all these clubs are trying to bank on the fact that, as much as fans might be unhappy, once the whistle blows at the start of 90 minutes, they're probably not going to be able to help themselves from getting emotionally invested in a game. I'm curious to know, Liverpool played last night, one day after this was announced, huge uproar. How were you feeling, and other Liverpool fans as well, once that whistle went?
Me personally, I felt like I was sleepwalking through the 90 minutes. I had it on. You know, my job now dictates that I have to watch a Liverpool match and talk about it. But I wasn't thinking about it, I've got to be honest with you. You know, it felt secondary to everything else that was going on. You know, only a matter of days ago, you know, Newcastle beat West Ham, and that was massive for Liverpool, because it's a chink of light in terms of getting top four to then get a place in the Champions League. And when Newcastle score the goal that they get, I'm out of my seat. I'm celebrating it like it's almost like a Liverpool goal, because I'm engaged in the idea that we can save what has been a poor season for Liverpool by qualifying for the Champions League. But this talk, this proposal, has swept all that away in one fell swoop. And for me, there was something missing from the game last night. You know, I thought Liverpool, as in the players and the manager, did their best. But I felt a little bit lost with it, and I don't think I was alone in that, because, as Andy's said very well there, you know, we're engaged in our clubs, and we've supported them for a long time, and supported them by going to the match, buying stuff, you know, being part of it, creating a culture around the game. And this just feels like a huge two fingers. You know, the way it's been announced, no engagement with fans, no consultation with fans, just, we are doing this and we are going to tell you how it's being done, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's an arrogance about that. And I also think as well that, you know, the idea that it's a Super League, the idea in any way that it's built upon sport and achievement, it's not. It's a line in, these are the clubs that generate the most revenue, so let's put them in a league together. That's what it's about. It's not about sport. I mean, you know, I know everyone's diving in on Spurs, because, you know, Spurs haven't won a European Cup, Arsenal haven't won a European Cup, and I did have to laugh at the joke I saw on Twitter last night about it's like someone turning up at the Crucible and putting 50p on the table and saying, well, you know what, I'll have a game. Spurs being in the Super League. But, you know, It is laughable. It is a laughable proposal. It feels back of the fag packet type stuff. There's so many questions around it that are going unanswered. Not least with this, I think we can all work out who the other 3 teams are that make up the 15 and what they're waiting for there. But how do you qualify for it? What about the counter arguments basically? And why is no one from? I mean, you've got Joe Glazer signing off a statement, so at least there's a name there, if you like. From Liverpool's perspective, there's absolute silence. There's nothing, and instead you throw in... It got me angry watching it last night, watching Jurgen Klopp. It really did. It riled me watching Jurgen Klopp being the man from Liverpool who's first to have to answer questions about this. Because it's nothing to do with Jurgen Klopp. He has not proposed the European Super League. He's not proposing this change, and in fact he said he's quite happy with how things are. So, and yet he's got to field these questions, he's got to answer them, and at the same time he's got to coach the team, motivate the team, give a team talk. And the players are human as well. They'll just be saying the same as us. Well, what's going on here? What's happening? Where's this come from? And instead they should be concentrating on, let's try and beat Leeds and get top 4, and they didn't do that. And I'm not saying that was why they didn't do it. But equally, I'll go back to the they are human point. They will have been talking about that on the bus. They will have been looking at their phones. That you couldn't avoid it in the media. It was everywhere. It was the top story in England and Europe, and I imagine it's created ripples worldwide. So they're wondering what's going on. We're wondering what's going on, and the people who have proposed the idea are largely sitting on their hands and saying nothing. And I don't see how that is a way to manage what is going on, because people will run, the more that there isn't information, people will run away with what it could be and what it could turn out to be next. So Andy mentioned Americanisation. That concerns me as well, because what is next? Did he start playing, if this goes ahead, did he start playing these games in the Far East? And it does that have to get up at 4 a.m. to watch it on the television, because it makes sense income-wise for them to do that. I mean, I suspect Andy feels the same in this. Liverpool Football Club and Manchester United should be of those cities, should reflect the values of those cities and the people who've made those clubs great. And just because, there is a worldwide audience now, fantastic. I'm proud of Liverpool's worldwide audience, as Andy said he was of Manchester United's. But equally, I talk to a lot of those fans who come through doing the Anfield Wrap. And they love coming to Liverpool. They love seeing the city. They love the values of the city, and they love speaking to the people of the city. It's not PlayStation for them. They support Liverpool and they like the city and the people as well. What these owners, this group of owners are doing, it seems to me, is just ringing a badge, just using a name and just using it to leverage as much money and as much power as they can possibly get. And that's grim. That's not sport. That's not what I'm in it for. I like the jeopardy. There should have been jeopardy last night. I like the jeopardy of that it can go wrong. I like that. I like that tension. That is sport. So Liverpool conceded an 87th minute equaliser last night, and I should be fuming about that. And I should be going on to our post-match content and saying, well, what were Liverpool up to? They were 1-0 up. They had, and instead I'm going on it talking about this plan, talking on about a crap website, a crap idea, and an idea that, goes against the grain of everything that football's been about for 100 years or more in this country. So, yeah, I didn't enjoy the match, it's fair to say. And if this is the sign of things to come, yes, they will be banking on the fact that we won't walk away because of our loyalty. But some people will, There's a tipping point for everyone. There's loads of people, Andy will know people as well at Man United who have already been priced out, who already can't go, who already watch on the television. Some people even go to the ground and will have a drink with the people they used to go to the match with and then watch in pubs because they can't afford, because they're priced out, because it's not for them. I can only see this continuing with this. You create a Super League, you can charge more money, you can ask for more money from TV companies. TV companies then ask for more money from us. And if you get all the packages that are already available, it's already an absolute fortune on top of season tickets, cup competitions and everything else. And so it's just a race to find the richest fans. And what about the loyal fans? What about the fans that have gone for years, formed the identity of the club, create the colour in the background, the flags, the banners, the songs, the traditions? Do we just forget all that and we just turn it into a piece of theatre, just a pay-per-view, PlayStation-style event, the best v the best? I mean, Jurgen Klopp said it himself in those comments in 2019. doesn't that get boring? Like, I like playing Real Madrid, don't get me wrong, but I like that it's scarce, and I like that you have to qualify for it, and I like that it's different when it happens. If it's every week, well, where's the fun in that?
John W. Henry probably doesn't like the fact that it's scarce, and that's what it all maybe boils down to, Gareth. Like, Andy, it's interesting that Alex Seferin came out yesterday and called Woodward a snake, for example. I think there may have been a lot of Manchester United fans saying, no shit, Alex. Like, I mean, and the idea that the Glazers have signed off on this and are part of one of the more insidious stories that we've seen in football. Again, no surprise to Manchester United fans. So, does that worry you when it comes to trying to stop this thing? That the Glazers have been able to put their hands over their ears. Ed Woodward has put his hands over his ears over the last 15 years and ignored all protest. Why would that change now?
Yes, it does worry me, because I saw what happened in 2005. I saw people singing "Not for Sale," signing up to petitions, turning up, complaining, forming a new football club, of which my brother was one of the first players to sign for. A lot of my friends went to support FC United. That caused no end of ructions. And yet, the following season, every seat inside Old Trafford was full, was taken. That's what worries me, because football fans are incredibly loyal, but they're also incredibly fickle. And I've travelled around the world studying football fans, watching them. I've seen Barca fans pushing for the president to be removed, because I always thought that the Barca model was the right one, this fan ownership. The problem is it involves human beings, and human beings make a mess of things a lot of the times. And I've seen the Barca fans having these huge protests against the president and motions being put forward and rival candidates jockeying for position. And then Barca, because the team had not been winning, it's all about results. And then Barca win 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games in a row, and it just melts away. And that really worries me. But a problem with this Super League is a lot of the people who were attracted to these super clubs, your Liverpools, Manchester Uniteds, Madrids, they were attracted because of success, because of glory, because of winning. If it's a league table, someone has to finish bottom of that. I see different strands of fandom, and it concerns me. So at Old Trafford, even when times are pretty bad, your match-going fans will be pretty supportive. And David Moyes could vouch for that, Louis van Gaal, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And you look online, and there's this fury that does not represent the reality. They got Barcelona's manager the sack last season because they weren't happy because they'd been knocked out by Liverpool the previous season. They'd only won the league the 2 previous seasons, and Valverde was very popular with the players. So if these super clubs are trying to court these new supporters, I think that's inherently risky as well, because as Gareth said, your long-standing supporters, they've helped build the identity of the club, the songs, which the sponsors try and buy into. And it's full of ironies here, because you have credit card companies, coffee makers, car companies who use images of football fans holding flags and flares. And if you actually try and get in a stadium with a flag or a flare, you're not allowed. And there's no one worse for this than at the big tournaments run by FIFA and UEFA. I was at the World Cup in 2014. I saw some brilliant flags from England fans, and they were all stripped away because MasterCard had paid a bit more money. So there's so many unedifying parts of football. But this, it seems like a step too far. It seems like there's a lot of unity among supporters in being against this. However, if I'm playing devil's advocate, they're probably waiting for the hot air to boil over, to move away. They probably knew there was going to be a negative reaction. And they probably know that if they put Liverpool against Barcelona or Man United against Real Madrid on, people will tune in, because people are hypocrites as well. And that's what worries me. And I've done this for 31 years. I've seen fans every single year come to me and say, it's not what it was, I've had enough, I'm giving my season ticket up. And they don't. Some do. And Gareth made a good point about people who've been priced out. So when I used to get the bus from Urmston and Stretford to Old Trafford, it was full of local people who could afford to support their local football team. That's long gone. That had gone by 94, 95. And I'm not parochial. I don't think that football clubs should only be for their local community, because some of the very best Manchester United fans are from Dublin. They're from London. They're from around the world. I know people who've followed the team for years from Amsterdam and go to 10 games a season. Not really these people that the Super League are interested in. I was described yesterday, or people of Mail, as a legacy supporter. They're not really that bothered about the match-going supporters. It's the broadcast revenues that they want. Even more money for players. I'm sorry, how much difference does it make if a player goes from 300,000 a week to 400,000? Get your house in order first. Have a financial fair play system that actually works. The problem is that the governing authorities are not as strong as some of the billionaires and oligarchs who own the biggest clubs. The clubs have got the power, and that's really concerning. And it's come a complete turn. I remember interviewing Man United secretary Ken Merritt in 1991, and he basically said to me, UEFA barely respond to our correspondence. They look down on us. They don't want to know us. And this was at a time when English clubs were the pariahs, but now it has completely changed. And now UEFA are the ones who are worried because they know that the super clubs have got all the power.
Gareth, it does seem that there is maybe more room for surprise on the Liverpool side of things when it comes to how John Henry has behaved. Maybe just because he hasn't been around as long as the Glazer family, and maybe the protests against Manchester United have just been way more vociferous, rightly so, for so much longer. That has to change now, right? Like, even if this European Super League is dead in the water in a week, do you think that Liverpool will see Manchester United levels of protest against their American owner over the next few months and when fans come back to stadiums?
I mean, it does. It will obviously depend on how it unfolds and what is said. I imagine that eventually one of them will speak. You can't go through a process like this surely and never speak. But I do think that there are people who feel disappointed about this already in Liverpool, and it will grow from there because, you know, we talked before about the previous ownership regime at Liverpool and what a mess that was. And, you know, fans were part of getting them out of Liverpool. You know, there were protests at the match, before the match, after the match. There was lots and lots of stuff online which people worldwide engaged with. I remember even Hicks and Gillette trying to get finance to keep hold of Liverpool, and someone in New York spotting them trying to do it, going in and out of a finance house, essentially, and putting that on the internet, and then people going from there, bombarding that place and saying, do not do business with these people. This is what they're doing to our football club. So there is a power of the fans. There's no two ways about it. And especially if fans come together from rival clubs, I mean, that would be huge because, you know, I think there's a little bit of a bet being taken on tribalism here as well, that, you know, they know that if fans come together, this will be very difficult for them to get through. But fans will always find a way. And look, I've done it in this interview. I've had a pop at Spurs. So, you know, we have got to find a way to stop doing that and maybe come together and find our common ground on all this. But I feel let down by them, I've got to be honest with you. I mean, I've done Anfield Rap podcasts and defended them and said, you know, I don't think they're bad owners. I don't think you put them in the same places as the Glazers, as some of the, you know, owners who've come into places and changed the kit, the badge, the name, you know, whatever you like. And they've made mistakes before and they've backtracked on them. But some of that was down to the power of the fans. Let's have it right. So, you know, when they tried to charge £77 for tickets at Anfield, a proportion of the crowd walked out, myself included. And that was something that I thought I would never ever do, to walk away from a match that, you know, you feel a part of, engage with, something that you can even influence maybe, to walk out on the 77th minute. And the numbers that did that was massive, and a U-turn followed very quickly. That's why I'm surprised at their approach on this, because I think they will have known that they would get the reaction that they've got, and yet they've chosen to do it anyway. You know, they've employed people to create bonds between the supporters and the club that have been broken by the previous regime. They've done a lot of work in the community as well to build up goodwill. And I think largely they were getting there. I mean, there were people who were always suspicious of them, who would criticise absolutely everything they do. Those people exist at every single football club and will never be happy, whoever the owner is. But, you know, I tried to be fair with it on the Anfield Rap, and I think the rest of us have as well. And we said, well, look, you know, they've built us a new stand. They've won us the league. They got Jurgen Klopp. You know, they've got a lot of things right. They've done great work in the community, like I mentioned. They supported the food banks idea, which was a fan's idea, which clubs didn't really need to get involved in, but they did get involved in, and it's quite political to do that. And that was good, though. We wanted them to do that. It felt like it was part of the, you know, they were being part of the city and part of our community. This is completely devoid from that approach, and it's very, very disappointing, and it's lit a match to a lot of things they've said in the past, I think. And they will be dealing with the flames one way or another for a while now. There'll be a lot of distrust in this ownership. But they've obviously known that risk, and they're prepared to take that risk. And I think Andy's right in that they think maybe, you know, a lot of the bluster will die away. The wider media, you know, magnifying glass on all this will go elsewhere, and you will just end up with some angry fans. And what will they really do? And I think they can get their way. I think they think this is the right direction of travel. It feels a little bit different this time to some of the other stuff where very quickly it turned. I think they're going to try and dig in, try and get there. You know, you see when the other bodies who I've no love for either, the same as Andy, we've been shafted enough by them as well. But, you know, when they're sort of trying to counterclaim and saying, well, we'll do this, you know, they seem to already have the ducks in the row on that one, and they're saying, well, we've already spoke to lawyers and you can't do that. So they thought it out in terms of that, and they feel they can do it. But in general as well, I think, you know, hopefully all of this creates a conversation, as Andy said, about the treatment of football fans in general. Like, if our clubs get to a European Cup final, why is it so hard for actual fans of those clubs to get a ticket? You know, that's annoying. If the ground holds 70,000 or 80,000, why are UEFA saying, well, there's 12,000 tickets or whatever it may be? Ridiculous allocations. The FA do the same. The prices are ridiculous. The schedule of the game is ridiculous. You know, the amount of football being played is ridiculous. And we're burning out our players. And again, sure, you know, if you want to talk about products, well, what about that? Because, you know, is that good? Isn't there already too much football, perhaps? You know, shouldn't we be thinking about, if we're thinking about quality of product and people getting engaged with it, well, you want to see the best players being able to play their best football, not flogging them so they're knackered. Because I think we've all watched knackered footballers this season in the schedule that they've had, and now we're looking to sort of to increase that. It just all seems a bit mad, and it is clearly based on money, greed and power, not sport, not fans, and not football as we know it.
Guys, just finally, a question very quickly for both of you, I'd say as well, to be honest. Would you still feel comfortable covering these matches if a Super League was to go ahead?
Go ahead, Andy.
You're asking me if I'm going to give up my job. It's a big question, you know.
I know, yeah.
You know, I was in Madrid last week. I went to cover it as a journalist. I'm not a fan of Real Madrid. I'm not a fan of Liverpool. Honestly, I'm not. And I went there as a journalist, covered it. Had great chats after the match with Tony Cruz, with Andrew Robertson, and that's how I earned my living that week. Would I give up? Would I stop? Well, I didn't walk away in 2005 when the Glazers took over at Manchester United. I know plenty of people who did, and even more who didn't, and plenty who've come back to Manchester United. So it's all riddled with politics. I wasn't a big fan of the Premier League idea when it was first mooted in 1992 either. I still carried on watching Manchester United. I don't know the answer. Don't know the answer to the question. I don't like the idea of a Super League. I feel like as a journalist, I should report what's going on in an informed manner. I feel like as a supporter, I do not like the idea. And yet I've just received an email now from UEFA asking me to approve my accreditation for the European Super League. For the European Championships next month, which I'm going to.
You nearly dropped a massive bombshell on us there, Andy.
Yeah, it's starting next week, and I can't wait for it to happen. No, I think I don't know. I hope it does not happen. I think there are too many games. And Gareth's point about burnout is absolutely right. And there's people within the clubs who are absolutely against this idea, but they can't come out and speak publicly like we're speaking now because they're just normal people with normal jobs. And they can't go against the bosses and lose the jobs. I see an incredible number of hard-working people at Manchester United who've kept the show on the road and done a lot of good things, like Liverpool has, and many of the same things which Gareth talked about this season. And there's been no let-up. I know people who've just been... And no one has any sympathy for people who work for football clubs because they think, oh, it'd be great. I'd love to work for a football club as well. But they don't like this idea either. I don't like the idea. The fans do not like the idea. Would I completely stop going to football if it happened? I don't think I would. I think I'd still go to football. I think I'd still work as a football journalist because that is my job.
Like, I think the Glazer comparison is perfect there. Like, I mean, you didn't stop covering Manchester United when the Glazers came in. In fact, the work of journalism sometimes is as important when bad things are happening, and maybe from within as well, things might change. I'm not sure if you want to chime in on that as well, Gareth.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons the Anfield Wrap is where it is and why it was created and why it was supported from day one was that it came off the back of Hicks and Gillette. That's where the idea was born. That's why the original members of our group know each other, because we were involved in protests, we were involved in Spirits of Shankly. I created a fanzine around that time as well because I didn't think a lot of the stuff in the media reflected fans' views. I didn't think, some of the media were doing their job essentially at the time. So the same as Andy, really. I mean, I'd love to, throw some big dramatic thing out there and say, well, if this happens, I'm going to walk away from football. But equally, I'm tied in by bills. I'm tied in by my family. I've got to pay the rent and all the rest of it. So, it'd be very difficult for me to suddenly find work to the same level of income just at the click of a finger. I'm not some fat cat who can make huge decisions like people in Boston currently are for Liverpool and how they're looked at. So I think I'd have to stay with it. But equally though, there is a pile-on effect, I think, sometimes, which I've seen work with some of my mates where they just say, oh, well, that's the final straw for me now. I'm not going to go anymore. I invest too much money, too much time into all of this. And I think some of those legacy fans, as they were described, will walk away. And that would be a real shame because, I always say one of my best mates has had a season ticket at Liverpool since he was 8 years old, and he's 45 now. And I always say to him, unfortunately, if you tomorrow decided that you did not want to go anymore and you gave up your ticket, no one would really care at Liverpool. No one would ring you up or write you a letter and say thank you for your support and why have you walked away. You just go, okay, then there's an opportunity to put a different bum on that seat. And that's a little bit sad. That's a little bit sad for me. I think the loyalty of fans shouldn't just be dismissed. Shouldn't be, oh well, there's all these younger fans who like football like this and this is what they want and they play on the PlayStation and they create their own Super Leagues on there, so we're going to do our own version of that. All of that's a little bit sad because football clubs only exist because of the communities that they rose from in the first place. So to dismiss those communities, there's something wrong in that. And I'd like to think, fan media, the likes of myself, Andy and others, will keep on fighting the good fight, and so that's probably what I will do as well. People might say that I'm a hypocrite for doing that or whatever, and that's absolutely fine. That's the internet, that's the world, that's the way things are. But it's just not realistic, is it? And maybe that's why they think it'll work, because the likes of me will moan, we'll gripe, we might take part in protests, but they might just think they can ride it out and do it anyway.
Gareth, well said, and Andy Mitten as well. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. That was brilliant stuff. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Andy Mitten and Gareth Roberts there of United We Stand and the Anfield Wrap, respectively. Right, we've got loads of reaction to that conversation, as you can imagine, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Before that, we will start with the sports pages. It is 8:54, by the way. Reports: 2 English clubs close to losing their nerve with SuperLeague is the main story this morning. That is from Ollie Holt's tweet earlier on, that there may be somebody about to lose in this game of chicken. Manchester United captain confronted Woodward over ESL plans. Harry Maguire not overly happy when he heard the news. Neville on Glazers: they are scavengers and need booting out of United. Definitely the strongest voice on all of this has been Gary Neville, in fairness to him. You can get into all the different things that maybe he's had a part in when it comes to Salford City and Sky, but he's been really strong when he's been speaking about it over the last couple of days. James Corden, meanwhile, decries European Super League on his US television show, and Jurgen Klopp says forbid Gary Neville from talking about you'll never walk alone. And maybe actually Liverpool fans will disagree with the fact that I said Gary Neville's been strong in this for the last couple of days. Jurgen Klopp would certainly be one of those people who maybe disagrees with that. The Irish Daily Mail in front of me here. Snakes and liars is the main headline. UEFA blast United chief for role in rebel league. UK government in vow to kill plot. Players face World Cup and Euros ban. Super League, held by Super Leeds, is the other headline there. And also here, Mark Gallagher reporting that UEFA set deadline for plan to allow fans into Aviva. The FAI have been given until Friday to come up with a workable plan that would see supporters allowed into the Aviva Stadium this summer for the European Championship games that are still due to take place. The Irish Times leads with a fairly striking photo from Anfield. Shame on you, RIP LFC, 1892 to 2021. Super League players face World Cup and Euros ban, says Seferin. They've got comment here from Dr. Declan Jordan saying breakaway another step towards globalisation. And Premier League's Big Six and why they want to join a European Super League. David Conn, as ever, one of the best voices you will read on this. The Irish Examiner. Where now for fallen Mourinho after a sour end at Tottenham? UEFA will ban clubs as soon as possible, and ESL's departing dozen have kick-started a classic game of chicken. Meanwhile, in GAA, Horan and Quirk both want increase in number of substitutes. So intercounty managers have come out after Micheál Donoghue called for unlimited substitutes. This is Mike Quirk and James Horan to give support in principle to the idea. The Daily Telegraph goes with the headline, Dirty Dozen face European ban. Game ready for war with Super League. And Raging Klopp brands Leeds protest a joke. The Irish Daily Star. Sling your hook. Furious UEFA chief wants to kick clubs out of Champions League and ban Big Six players from Euros. And Klopp's not returning, is the headline on that. The Irish Sun. Stop the plot. Klopp defies owners over Super League. And Martin Lipton's exclusive, as you mentioned earlier on, Premier League UEFA acts threat to rebels. We had Martin Lipton on with us earlier on, and you can catch that back very shortly on youtube.com and on the OTB Sports app. The Irish Mirror, you're done for. UEFA aim to kick City, Chelsea, United and Arsenal out of next week's European semis and their stars out of the Euros. It'd be very interesting if they actually just go along and do it, because will there be enough time for the Super League clubs, those four, to actually come back and protest that? Does it have to go through the courts? Will it be a long and protracted process? God, I don't know. The London Times goes with Klopp speaks out against Super League, and the photograph there of José Mourinho packing his things and leaving Tottenham Hotspur. The Guardian, the sacked one. Mourinho exits as Spurs aim to go back to the future, and a cynical power grab by owners who don't care, writes Barney Ronay. That is the Guardian. The Irish Independent. English clubs on precipice as tensions spiral over Super League. Cullen can't offer clarity on Furlong contract negotiations. That's the latest on the one remaining guaranteed starter for Ireland who's up in the air with his contract at the moment. Leo Cullen unable to offer any assurances around the future of Tadhg Furlong. And Sligo faced Connacht task after missing out on last year's championship completely due to a COVID outbreak within the squad. Sligo have been handed a difficult assignment against Mayo in the Connacht Championship. A lot of Mayo fans this morning pretty happy with their draw last night. And then the Herald, finally. Leeds protest angers Klopp. Pool boss says he understands fan unrest as Reds let points slip. And there's news on those Leo Cullen stories and the championship draw from yesterday. But, Will O'Callaghan, we've got fresh GAA Championship news this morning.
Yeah, we do. We know the route for Dublin to potentially win their 11th Leinster senior football title in a row as they go on a bid for 7 All-Ireland titles in a row. They will be away to either Wexford or Wicklow in the quarterfinals of the Leinster Football Championship. Dessie Farrell's side going into that quarterfinal, having won the last 10 in the province. The other last 8 clashes will see Kildare play the winners of Louth and Offaly. Louth and Offaly is the first meeting since 2001. Meath await either Carlow or Longford, and there'll be an All-Midlands clash of Laois and Westmeath. We've had the hurling draw in the last few minutes as well. Owen and Kilkenny, the defending champions, will await either Laois or Davy Fitzgerald's Wexford in the semi-finals. Galway were seeded as well, having reached the final last season, so they're straight into the last 4 of the competition. The McDonagh Cup winners from last year, Antrim, have been drawn against Dublin in the quarterfinals in Leinster, and all of those games will be played this year at neutral venues. There will be qualifiers as well for the teams who lose in the first round of the championship, and the 2 beaten teams in those qualifiers will then face potential relegation to the McDonagh Cup for next season.
So what's the story with the venues, do we think, when it comes to Dublin? They're going to be away from home all the way in Leinster?
Yeah, that seems to be the case. They're going to play just one home game in the league, or could potentially be away all the way in the league as well. So that's the punishment coming off the back of their early training session, which happened at the tail end of last month. And then they're going to be away from home at least for the first round. I would imagine that from the semi-finals on, you're probably looking at Croke Park for games after that. But at the very least, they're going to be on the road for that game against either Wexford or Wicklow. Not sure if that's good news for either of the W counties going into this, given that they'll almost certainly be beaten and will do well to keep that down to 12 points or more. But at least they're going to have the chance to host the Dubs probably in an empty venue at the end of May or into early June.
Fortress Aughrim ain't what it once was when people were in there. So it'll be, well, obviously Innovate Wexford Park will be the alternative venue there. So they haven't actually confirmed how many games Dublin are getting away from home with. Like, it could be one, or it could be the entire Leinster Championship, basically.
Yeah, potentially. Well, it depends, again, if you consider Croke Park to be a neutral venue or a home venue for the Dubs, not to bring that argument up. But if it ends up, say, in Croke Park for semi-final and final, technically they'd be at neutral venues and having played in away quarter-finals. So we shall see what happens in that regard, but they'll be obviously the overwhelming favourites to win the championship. I would imagine that, you know, Meath will probably be quite happy to have Carlow or Longford, and as they try and get back into a provincial final again. You know, for Laois and Westmeath, their summer is going to be determined by who wins that game. Both teams will be fighting to try and stay in Division 2 of the league this season to ensure that they're playing top-flight football, no matter what happens with the Tailteann Cup coming in next year. And it could be a tasty quarter-final if it's Kildare and Offaly potentially. Again, Offaly would be expected to overcome Louth, but then again, Mickey Hart will want to get off to a winning start in the championship. It was a very close-run thing between Kildare and Offaly in the quarterfinals last season, came down to the last couple of minutes of the game. But intriguing to see if Mickey Hart can pull one over on John Mon in the first round. That's a very novel pairing. They haven't met in the championship since the qualifiers in the inaugural year, the qualifiers back in 2001. And of course, we've got no qualifiers this year. So if you're beaten, you go straight out of the championship this summer.
Well, O'Callaghan, good stuff. Thanks for bringing us that.
No probs.
So there's going to be more on that as the day develops. The Ulster Football Championship, the big one still to come. That's coming on this evening, and you've got, I think, Antrim, Armagh, Donegal down in Fermanagh in one bowl, and then Cavan, Derry, Monaghan and Tyrone in another. So as far as I'm aware, that is seeded. Let's bring you one more sports page this morning. So this is coming from Record in Portugal. Benfica lobbying to become the Portuguese representative of the European Super League, which is a very interesting wrinkle in all of this, because there is going to become a stage here, Neil, where teams will want to get involved if this proceeds. Now, if this is dead in the water in a week, then there's going to be no clamour to come in. But I think we're forgetting about the fact that football is based on greed, and if there is a 12-team Super League that exists in a week's time, for example, there's going to be 8 spots there. And if Dortmund, Bayern and PSG are not for moving, then teams like Benfica are going to be waking up to this. But there might even be extra Premier League teams, could there not, who might wake up to this and say, we want in.
100%, and that's where the real messy situation is being created now, I think, because you probably have a lot of clubs who are on the outside of all of this and are looking in thinking, well, maybe they don't necessarily agree with the idea. A lot of their fans, they know their fans won't particularly like it, but at the same time, the longer it goes on and the more likely it looks like it's going to happen, you know, you kind of want to be in that little cabal. You want to be in the you want to be inside the tent, as they say, you know, looking out. And particularly in countries like, you know, in Portugal, where you have 2 or 3 massive clubs, like you have a Benfica, Porto, or a Sporting Lisbon. One of those is desperately going to want to be in there. Ajax in the Netherlands, like, you know, there's some of the smaller countries, smaller leagues, I should say, rather than smaller footballing countries, but where you have one massive team in there. Even I heard people on Sunday evening, now there was an element of tongue-in-cheek, but the odd Celtic or Rangers fan kind of saying, well, you know, we're certainly a huge club and a huge market that if they were to be in that and they had the money coming in, all of a sudden they probably actually would be a fairly large player if they were part of that special cohort and that special group. So it is creating a very, very messy situation where you have everyone not necessarily wanting to publicly say we should be in there, but maybe doing a bit of backdoor lobbying.
Celtic and Rangers will be out the gap immediately if they both got invited to this thing. The Ajax, in fairness, have come out and condemned this from an early stage.
Fair enough.
I'd kind of trust Ajax, but then again, who can you trust in football anymore? Nobody. Like that, and that's what's going to be really fascinating is the Premier League meeting. Like I know we've said it a couple of times this morning, but they may not have the strength or the votes to get rid of them, even if everybody who's not in the Super League is unanimously against it. But it's not like all the other 14 clubs are bastions of goodness and things like that. So there's going to be more to be played out here. And there's, as we say, 8 other spots in this league that could be used as bargaining chips to get this thing over the line over the next little while. So we'll keep you up to speed if there's any breaking news over the next little while. And let's tell you what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio today, by the way. We've got OTB Gold from 1 o'clock in the afternoon. This is Wexford 1956 in the company of Art Foley and Ned Wheeler. The Dadcast is up at 3 o'clock, and then a career retrospective interview with Ronnie Whelan after that at 4. From 6 o'clock then OTB Gold, Joe Malloy sitting down with Ruby Walsh, and then 7 o'clock tonight on OTB Sports Radio and on News Talk. You've got Tony Evans joining the show, and there'll be much more as the fallout from the Super League continues. Up next this morning, though, we're turning our attention to rugby because we've got Neil Treacy's Tide 5.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Women's Six Nations is here, and OTB Sports is your one-stop shop for all the best coverage, analysis and opinion.
As Ireland take on Wales and France to decide their position on finals day, we will bring you a special weekly Six Nations show with some of the great names of the game, as well as special interviews with Irish legends Sophie Spence and Rosie Foley.
With reporters at the games, all the latest team news, match previews and much, much more. Check out otbsports.com/Women's Six Nations.
Check out the Boyle Sports app today for details on which football match is getting the no-lose treatment this week. Plus, browse through dozens of new player markets, all powered by Opta. Shots on target, left foot, right foot, headed goals, assists and more. See the Boyle Sports app for full T's and C's. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Gamble responsibly. See gamblingcare.ie 18+.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
You're welcome back. It is 6 minutes past 9. You're watching OTB AM, which is live in association with Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Neil Treacy, there is plenty to get into this morning in the Tide 5. I take it we're starting with Ireland against France.
Yeah, we will, Owen. Obviously, there's been a lot of coverage of it since, and unfortunately, the coverage hasn't been too good because it was a pretty bad performance by Ireland. There were a lot of really, really basic mistakes and simple errors. And look, I know there is the argument of professionalism, and there is the argument that there is a gulf in class between the likes of England and France, and then the step down to Ireland and Italy, and then a further step to Wales and Scotland. But unfortunately, and as like Fiona Steed mentioned last night's Monday Night Rugby and Off the Ball, as much as the gulf is there, Ireland made the gulf look a lot bigger on Saturday with some of the mistakes they made in the first half. So we're going to look at 2 series of the game here, which is actually leading up to both the first and the second French tries. The first one we're going to look at is an example of some poor Irish defending, and then afterwards we're going to look at some poor Irish attack that actually led up to a French try as well. So what we're going to look at here is it's just so passive, and there's a lack of organisation and clarity as to what's happening. So the first picture we're looking at here, this is scrum, 13 and a half minutes gone. As you can see there, it's France 5, Ireland 3 at this stage. France had just scored the try. This is the view of this is a replay of the try. This is just a view from behind, so we can kind of get a better picture of what's going on. And what we need to look at is on the left side of our screen. It's the way Ireland's set up, because the scrum is obviously 20 metres in from the touchline, so it's leaving a sizable enough blindside and a very inviting blindside for France to attack. So what Ireland have obviously decided here is that they are quite wary of France trying to get a nudge down the blind side of the pitch, breaking down the blind side and having a 2-on-1 in what is a fairly large open space. So what Ireland have done is they've taken a big chance, and they have moved Hannah Tyrrell, as you can see, who's circled in the red, and also just off screen where I have that red arrow, Bavian Parsons is obviously out there as well. So Ireland are actually doubling up in defence. They're putting 2-on-1, 2 defenders to 1 attacker on that blind side. But what they're doing then is they're leaving themselves one short out on the open side. Now, I think in a lot of cases, what a lot of teams might be doing, if they're wary of this, I would say anyway, Hannah Tyrrell is probably committing too much to that blind side. What you're going to see a lot in rugby is when teams are kind of just a little bit wary and unsure as to where to go, what they might do is position the out half for that first tackler directly behind the scrum, so that depending on where the scrum goes, okay, is it moving down towards the blind side? Okay, I can go out here and cover there. Is it clearly turning out towards the open side? Well, I can shift across and all our defenders can move across as well. But if we move on to our next clip here. So this is the scrum itself, what we're actually just going to look at. I just wanted to give you an idea of where the scrum is on the pitch, where the gain line is, and just how France are going to move this up and just tilt it up on the open side. And if we move on to our next clip, we can see exactly what happens. So basically, France get a small little nudge up on the loose side of the scrum, on the left side of the scrum. But what that does is it takes the Irish back row out of the equation a little bit. So as you can see, you have the arrow on the top of the screen. That is Claire Malloy, who's obviously, she's on the blind side. She has been, she's removed from the action ever so slightly because of the way that shifts up. You have Dorothy Wall, who's the right circle. She's actually being held in, which is a little bit of clever, cynical play by her French counterpart. She just has her arm on her. She's just holding her in for half a second. And then you can see Ciara Griffin at the back as well. And like Griffin, she has her head up out of the scrum at this stage. She knows it's moving. She knows it's coming towards the open side. And she's actually wary now at this stage. She needs to be able to break as quick as possible, because the longer this scrum goes on, the more she's going to be removed from the action and drifting out away from the play. So she's wary of this happening. She's ready to break. So we'll move it on to our next slide. And what we see is, first of all, we're going to look at the black line. That's just the gain line. That's just a reference point for our next clips to come. But obviously, as we can see on the left side of our screen, in the red circle, we have Hannah Tyrrell and Bavian Parsons, and then the yellow circle, that is just one French attacker. So obviously Ireland still have overcommitted to that blind side. And really what you want to be seeing, like, once that ball was clearly coming out towards the open side, you think Hannah Tyrrell and the Irish defence should have been pushing back outside, because France weren't going to be going down that blind option. Have to push out, create get your numbers even again out on that side. But what we're going to do here is, since Ireland have kind of overcommitted on that side and you're leaving yourselves ever so slightly short, you're giving France an automatic overlap. What you're going to need to do in this situation is, obviously you're defending narrowly because you're defending more narrow because you're going to have to bunch in. You're going to have to push up, and you're going to have a really, really quick line, because you need to rush them in attack. You need to make sure that they do not have much time to make decisions, and they're going to have to rush something. They're going to have to throw a pass at the last second, because if you give them time to just put the ball through the hands, that's where they find their overlap, and that's how they're going to go in. So if you move on to our next clip, we can see initially it starts out all right. Sene Nepu and Eve Higgins have pushed up quite well. You can see Sene Nepu is matched up with her opposite number, with the red line. Yellow line, that's Eve Higgins matching up with her opposite number. Lauren Delaney is the blue line, matching up with her opposite number. And that's where you see the extra player. Now, the orange line, that's ultimately going to be matching up with Emer Considine, who is defending much deeper for Ireland, obviously covering full back. Off screen, you're going to have another French defender, which is where the overlap is. So what we can see here now is the three Irish defenders, they've moved up, they've rushed pretty much up towards the gain line. So it's kind of just beyond where the scrum has set. But what they're going to need to do here is, France have moved this out towards the centre already. They've already got two passes out. What Eve Higgins and Lauren Delaney, who are the two players with the black arrows, what they need to do is ultimately they need to take a chance. They need to shoot up and try close off that space as quick as they can. Because if they hold back, if they just kind of hold their position and wait for France to come at them, you're just allowing France to run with the ball, move forward, and put it through the hands and just use the overlap. Now, unfortunately, we're going to move on to our sixth clip, and we can see the point that Eve Higgins and Lauren Delaney, the point that they actually bite in and the point that France are passing, they're still just at that line of the gain line. So they once they got up there, they didn't push up any further. They didn't get up into the fresh faces or rush them or rush them into making a decision. And France have been able to just go through the hands and use the overlap that they have. And we're going to move it on again to our next clip. And we can see we're going behind the goal again because we just need the space to see Emer Considine at this stage. She's ultimately in a really, really tricky situation because she's been left 2-on-1 now. She's the last line of defence. And she's kind of been left with a situation where she has to decide, does she stick or twist? Does she bite in on the French player who's carrying the ball and just take the chance that, okay, I'm going to rush her into making a bad pass. I'm going to rush her into, forcing the outside French attacker to dropping a ball. Or does she drift in defence? Does she mark up essentially with the French player who's on the outside and trust that Eve Higgins, who, as we can see with the red arrow, is covering back? So Emer Considine has a decision to make. Does she bite in and go for and just try rush the French ball carrier into doing something stupid, or does she trust her scramble defence to come back and make the tackle? Unfortunately, she kind of does neither, because as you can see, if we move it on to our last clip, she doesn't really step up at all. She's still just kind of hanging there waiting for the players to come onto them. Ultimately, Eve Higgins does actually get back and make the tackle. Considine hasn't moved out, and it just leaves the overlap. It's passed outside, and France run in. So there's a lot going on in that, and unfortunately, not too much of it is good.
Well, she shouldn't maybe be in that position in the first place, but I guess it's going to happen every so often. So
there were a lot of mistakes made before Emer Considine had the decision whether to bite in or not. From the setup where they're over committing on the blind side of the scrum to once the realization that the ball is going out on the open side, you need to get back outside. You need to, you can't just wait for in the chance that they are going to take an unlikely option down the blind side. And also then as well, just how passive they were in defence, waiting for France to come to them rather than rushing them into a decision when you're giving up an overlap. You need to rush up and get in their faces really, really quick and force them into making a mistake.
It seems that they're the sort of things that you just need an in-game awareness of, like somebody on the blind side of the scrum to say, we're overloaded here, get over, sort of thing, or shunted midstream, basically, rather than a sort of prescriptive defensive plan. Like, that's the answer to that, right?
Yeah, it's the sort of stuff, unfortunately, that should be hammered into you as a fundamental, really. And it's something that we've heard a lot about, the amount of training camps that they've had over the last number of weeks. And, these are the basics you should be expected when you are a team that's prepared as well. Unfortunately, I think mistakes like that don't necessarily come down to, are you a professional or are you an amateur, is the harsh reality of it. And look, in the game of rugby as well, there's another, it's like Mike Tyson said about boxing, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Sometimes when you're out there in the thick of it and there have been a couple of big hits, France were rushing up in defence huge as well and making some big tackles. Sometimes subconsciously, when that is happening, you're almost a little bit reticent to kind of shoot up yourself because there's almost an intimidation there. There's a worry of you're just ever so slightly hesitant to do it.
Yeah. Let's move on to the Ireland attack then, Neil.
Yeah, so this is a few minutes later, and unfortunately this is an Ireland attack, and it's showing two things. First of all, how quick France were in defence, kind of in contrast to what we saw from Ireland there in the previous play, but also it's how static Ireland were in attack. So there were way too many ball carriers who weren't stepping onto the ball, who weren't running onto the ball or coming up to the gain line. They were catching the ball and then beginning to move forward. So what we're going to look at here is it's a series of 5 phases where Ireland unfortunately go from just outside the 22 to losing about 15 to 20 metres in the space of these 5 phases and ultimately coughing up the ball, which France kick down the pitch and score a try from. So this is leading up to the French second try. We're just going to start it here and we're going to see where play is developing. It's after a good carry by Bevan Parsons. She's actually got a really, really good body position as well with the way she's placed the ball. She's giving herself a long body position. So that means the hindmost foot that the French players have to stay behind, that is further away from the ball, which actually is a very, very good thing to be doing. You want your body to be pointing back towards the try line when you're placing back that ball. So the X, we're just marking that's the ball about to be passed. And the yellow arrow is Lindsay Peat, the Irish loosehead prop. And we're just what I want you to do in a lot of these cases is keep an eye on where the red line is. Obviously, that's the gain line. And we're also going to look at where each Irish player is starting as they're being passed the ball and where they are when they receive the ball. So just take a note there of where Lindsay Peat is with the yellow arrow, and we move it on to our second clip. And as we can see, there's two red lines here. The red line on the right side, closer to the try line, that is where the Irish pass would have come from. That is where the last ruck was. But as we can see in this next red line, that's the part of the pitch where Lindsay Peat was tackled by a French player. So they're shooting right up, and Ireland are they're not getting any dominance with their carries. They're not driving through, and they're being met. I make that probably about 4 yards behind the last ruck. So all the players that are coming back from that ruck, they're running backwards to get back into position. And when you keep going backwards, as we can see from the next clip, if we roll it on again, this is where the next ruck is being formed. We can see that's our red line, that's the gain line, that's the hindmost foot, and our yellow arrow on the left side of the screen, that's Hannah Tyrrell standing in it out half for Ireland. And unfortunately, the pass is going to come to her, and she's not going to be moving up towards it. She's not going to be running onto the ball. It's standing and waiting for the ball to arrive into your hands before moving. But what's happening is the French players are moving up very, very quick, and they're getting up in their faces. As we roll it on again to our next clip, we can see this is the point that Hannah Tyrrell takes the ball into her hands. And that's the gap between where the ball was coming from and where Ireland take possession of it at first receiver. You're going backwards about 5 yards. You should be almost back up at the line at that stage if you're taking a little bit flatter. Now, as we can see, outside her, she has Ciara Griffin, who, in fairness to her, she's charging onto the ball. She's making a harder carry. But unfortunately, because she's starting from so much further back, if we roll it onto our next clip, number 5, we can see that where she is tackled, again, they're behind the line of play. They're behind the gain line. And we just have 2 X's here on the screen. The top of those, that is where the first ruck started 2 phases ago. And this is where Ireland are, after literally 2 phases of play, they've been driven back this far. You're probably talking 10 to 15 metres. There's more to come, unfortunately, as well. If we move on to number 6, we can see how the ball is recycled again. This is actually, we're skipping on a phase. Sene Nepu went out towards the right, and now we're coming back out towards the left again. This time it's Claire Malloy standing as a first receiver, and we're just keeping an eye once again. The red line, that is the gain line, and we have Claire Malloy circled there. We just want to keep note of this is where she is standing as the ball is being passed, and unfortunately, again, it's standing still waiting for the ball to arrive. It's not running onto the ball. It's not stepping out onto it. And if we move on we're going on to number 7, we can see this is the point that Claire Malloy has caught the ball. She's probably only a meter advanced from where she was standing when the ball was passed. But as we can see with the red lines, the French defence are shooting up. They're coming right up into her face. They're getting right in front of her and meeting her behind the gain line once again. We're going to move on to clip number 8. And we can see, in fairness, Claire Malloy, she manages to eke out an extra couple of yards out of it on the tackle because she is a very, very strong ball carrier. But this is probably the worst part of it. This is where it's really going to fall apart. We have 2 players circled there. The one closest to us on the near side, that's Dorothy Wall, flanker. Outside her, we have Lindsay Peat, and then outside her, on the left side, we have Emer Considine. So it's going to be those 3 players. Again, keep an eye on that red line. That is the gain line. And if we skip on to number 9, we can see that Dorothy Wall, again, she's just caught the ball in the position that she was standing. It's not stepping onto it. France are just able to drift across, and they're not really too worried. The red circle outside her, that's Lindsay Peat, and the blue circle outside Peat is Emer Considine. And if we skip on again, we can see Dorothy Wall at this stage. She has just passed the ball directly out to Lindsay Peat, who again is still standing in that same position. She hasn't advanced. They haven't advanced a yard at this stage, and they've already played 2 passes out towards the wing. And again, Lindsay Peat, we're going to run it on again. She's going to pass it out to Emer Considine. So Ireland have played 3 passes at this stage in this phase of play. And if you look at that black line, that is the gain line. They've passed the ball 3 times, and they're arguably the guts of 10 metres behind the gain line. Like, there's nobody running onto the ball. There's nobody stepping onto it. You would expect if Ireland were to get 3 passes together, one after the other, going out towards a wing, that they are getting up at the very least up towards the gain line, if not a little bit further. And what happens then is, if we move it on to number 12, Emer Constantine. She has a little bit of space. She's able to carry the ball. She gets tackled and held up, and the ball gets stripped out of her hands and kicked down the other end of the pitch. France score a try directly from it. But if we look at our two X's here, the X on the left, that is where the play is ultimately broken down, and the X on the right side of the screen, that is where play started 5 phases ago.
And a lot of work as well went into that, and tired bodies after a number of phases that actually went point backwards.
It takes so much out of you as well when you are going backwards. That's the toughest part of it as well.
That was really good stuff on the Ireland game. We do want to move on because we've got about 8 minutes left here. Let's go on to the Super Rugby, because there was something that really stuck out to you.
Yeah, this was a really fun try at the weekend, and I kind of feel like I'm at a kid's magic show at the moment, and I'm going to basically tell everyone that the rabbit was in the hat all this time, because I'm kind of being a bit of a stickler for the rules and a stickler for the law book here on what was a brilliant, innovative try we're going to take it from the Highlanders against the Blues in Super Rugby Aotearoa at the weekend. So this was 5 minutes into the game. It was the Blues' opening try of the match, and unfortunately for them, the Highlanders ended up winning it. But this was just a fantastic bit of a try, and I just want to point out maybe a couple of irregularities in the way the laws were adapted in this one. So basically, we see our numbers, our yellow numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We see our red numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a 5-man line out to the Highlanders, 5 metres from their own line in the early stages of this game. But what we are going to look at, first of all, Aaron Smith, Highlanders scrum half, is on the right. And we're also going to look at Jonathan Ruru, who is the Blues scrum half, or as we're just going to call him the receiver at the lineout, because teams will often change it up. They might put a forward in there, they might put a scrum half. He is a scrum half. He is standing in as the receiver. Now, officially what the receiver has to do is he has to line 2 meters back from the lineout. He's not allowed to advance up to the line until either the ball is out of the until the lineout is over as such. So that point is basically, if a player goes up and catches the ball and pops it down, then the lineout is over. If a player catches it, brings it to ground, the lineout is still in play until basically he is on the ground and has released the ball. But the X on our screen, that is probably where Ruru should really be. He's already starting to creep up when the lineout is still in play. And it's going to be really, really crucial for the try. Because if we roll on to our next clip, we can see that, again, he's advancing. The ball has been thrown into the Highlanders. Their jumper is up there. He has his hands on the ball. But he has already joined the back of the lineout pretty much. He's crept up onto the lineout. And then in the red, what we're going to look at is Aaron Smith, scrum half for the Highlanders, as we all know. But also, the other player circled out is the Highlanders number 8, circled on the right side of the pitch. So what a lot of teams will try to do when they're pinned that close to their own line, they'll try to get the ball off the top, get a quick ball out towards a big, strong carrier like a number 8 who's standing out there and who's going to just try eke out maybe 3 or 4 yards, not even spectacular ground, but what it does is it just opens out the pitch for the possibility of a clearance kick, rather than trying to do it so close to the touchline where you're probably unlikely to gain too much ground if you're sending the ball into touch. What we're going to look at again is this is the point now where the lineout is pretty much over, because it's been brought down to ground, and the Highlanders jumper, he's popping this ball straight out off the top now to Aaron Smith. But if we look at Ruru, who's standing right up on the gain line now at this stage, the yellow arrow above him, he has eyes only for Aaron Smith. He's obviously done his homework, and he knows this is a tactic that a lot of teams are going to be trying to do: get the ball out towards a hard carrier further out on the line, gain an extra few yards. But he's waiting and ready for this. He has his eyes firmly pinned on Aaron Smith, and he just times it perfectly, because you can see he's about to pass the ball. He's already made that sprint. He is darting. He is stepping up into that line. If we move it on to our next clip, we can see there, he has made his move. He's going for it. And he just dives onto that ball. He gets his hands onto it. It was an unbelievable catch as well, because to say he caught it into his fingertips would be an understatement. And it was a bullet of a pass by Aaron Smith as well. It was a brilliant read. It was a brilliant catch. And I'm being a complete stickler here. I would honestly say that if the option of a challenge was available to the Blues in that case,
They would have taken
it. They probably would have won it. Unfortunately, and it leads us into our next point: the Rainbow Cup and the trial laws that are going to come in. Unfortunately, even though the Captain's Challenge was available, the Captain's Challenge was available on the day, it wasn't available for that instance, because a Captain's Challenge, unfortunately, cannot be used for a line-out or a scrum. It can't be used at a set piece where they say there are, so many of the laws are completely open to interpretation. So they want to eliminate all of that. But will we get into it now, the trial laws for the Rainbow Cup? So yeah, Rainbow Cup starting this weekend. We're going to be seeing 3 trial laws that have been used throughout Super Rugby Aotearoa and Super Rugby AU as well over the last few weeks. The first of those that we'll speak about is probably what we spoke about there, the Captain's Challenge. So it essentially gives, as well as the TMO still being functioning, it gives each captain the option of 1 challenge per game, although they can use it again if it's successful, like a timeout or something like that in the NFL. But during the first 75 minutes of the game, a captain's challenge can be used on a try decision or in a case of foul play. So they've got 20 seconds to make their call and say to the referee if they want something to be looked at. That's in the first 75 minutes. But in the final 5 minutes of a game, a captain can use their challenge to challenge any decision that happens on a pitch, aside from something at a scrum or a lineout. But it opens up a little bit of an anomaly, and it creates a bit of an anticlimax, because something we would have seen just this past weekend between the Crusaders and the Chiefs in Super Rugby again was that 79 minutes were on the clock. The Chiefs were either 1 or 2 points in front against the Crusaders. Crusaders had the ball down in Chiefs territory. They give away a penalty, and Scott Barrett, the Crusaders captain, went up to the referee and asked to use his captain's challenge. He could barely think of anything specific to challenge. He just wanted to say, like, it honest to God, it was just check that last ruck. See, was there anything we can get out of this that we might be able to nick a penalty off?
So this is going to happen all the time.
Well, look, it's a very, very specific situation, but it did absolutely take the climax out of what had been a great game to that point. And like in the end, he just kind of took a guess and said, "Can you just check and see were their hands on the ground?" Yeah. And the referee and the assistant referees and TMO look at it. It was a clear as day penalty to the Chiefs all afternoon long. Like, it was a simple decision. It just wasn't really in the spirit of the law, I would say. Now, there are a couple more laws as well to get through. The red card replacement. So this is pretty simple. It is, if a player is red carded, after 20 minutes, the team who had been red carded can bring on a replacement. The player who is red carded is gone for the game, but the team have the option. Well, I say the option. They're obviously going to do it. The team can bring on a replacement player after 20 minutes. Personally, I'm not really a fan of it. I think if you're going to be hard and clamp down on the dangerous play we've seen, you really need, you can't be leaving any wiggle room in it. And then the other one we have then as well is the goal line dropout. So this is if a try is held up, if a ball is knocked on over the try line or in the in-goal area, or if it is carried over the line and touched down, rather than a 5-meter scrum, which we would have seen, we're going to have a goal line dropout, similar to a 22 dropout, just taking place from the goal line. I've seen it a little bit in action. I'll be totally honest. I'm kind of not too pushed either way on it. I don't see what it has added. I don't see what it has taken away. It's probably one of those things you'd like to see developed out a little bit more. One thing I'm disappointed we aren't trialling out is the 50-22, which has been trialled in Australia, and it hasn't made an enormous difference. But it's when it has happened, you've kind of gone, oh, that was really nice.
Yeah.
That was a lovely bit of skill. It hasn't taken away from the game or it hasn't added to it, but when it has worked out, you've kind of just gone, oh, that was lovely.
There's no harm in having it.
In the opening weeks, Rob Carney put in a lovely kick down into the corner, wins his team a line out, and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I like the idea of that. It isn't taking over a game.
Yeah.
It isn't changing the way teams are playing necessarily, but it's just I just found it to be a nice quirky addition.
Yeah, maybe one for next year. In general, Neil, are you buzzing for the Rainbow Cup? Are you curious? Where are the excitement levels at?
Kind of just general curiosity, I'll be totally honest, because I think like Leinster and Ulster over this weekend anyway, at least their team selections are going to have one eye on their Champions Cup and Challenge Cup quarterfinal or semi-finals the following week. I think with Munster and Connacht, you're probably going to see a lot of development selections. I'd expect to see the likes of Kenyon Knox and Roman Salanoa, for example, playing a lot for Munster over the next few weeks as they try to test out their options. It'll be great, obviously, to see RG Snyman back from Munster in a couple of weeks' time. I do think, though, I wouldn't be too confident of an Irish team winning this, simply because of the way their fixtures are going. They just have more difficult fixtures because the Irish teams are better. Take Connacht for an example. There are 3 games. If all goes to plan and we do have the South African teams playing against the Irish and the Welsh and Scottish and Italian teams after the 3 weeks, like Connacht's first 3 games of this competition are against Ulster, Munster and Leinster. It's broken up country by country. Edinburgh played Glasgow 3 times instead. Like, I know what the 3 tougher games are in that. Zebra played Benetton 3 times. I know what the 3 toughest games are in that run. If you're looking at Connacht or Ulster or Munster or Leinster, they certainly have tougher games than the other teams. That's why you could kind of see maybe Irish teams taking points off each other, and it'd probably mean, like, if I was to be guessing, I don't think an Irish team's going to be winning it.
Yeah, I think it's a fair prediction. Neil, Treacy, great stuff. That was the Tide 5, and thanks a million for being with us this morning as well. Just a bit of an update on the Super League. Gary Neville tweeted about 5 minutes ago saying, Joel Glazer won't turn easily. Jurgen Klopp and the senior players could turn FSG. Man City most likely to crack. This isn't for them. The other 3 will follow the lead of the others. This is the news this morning that a couple of clubs are now starting to waver in their belief that the Super League is the right thing for them, one of the 6 English clubs involved. There's been a strong Everton statement released this morning as well. They've called from their board of directors for the Big 6 to immediately withdraw from the European Super League proposals and ask owners of those clubs to remember the privileged position they hold. They're saddened and disappointed to see proposals of a breakaway league pushed by 6 clubs. The backlash is understandable and deserved and has to be listened to. This preposterous arrogance is not wanted anywhere in football outside of the clubs that have drafted this plan. So that's from Everton this morning. A couple of comments then to wrap up on this morning. Terry says, I'm a League of Ireland fan, 0 time for the Premier League, but really enjoying listening to Andy and Gareth talking like real fans with real passion for their club. He's talking about Andy Mitten and Gareth Roberts. If you're just joining us this morning, well worth checking out on YouTube now. Big clubs sold their souls to the devil a long time ago. All this chest beating is a moot point. The devil has come to collect, says Brian. Barry says, think of genuine economic instability this will cause in an already unstable COVID economy. Hundreds of clubs across Europe go bankrupt and the thousands of jobs will be lost. It's a really good point. This is for the economic gain of the 12, but it's also going to be to the economic detriment of those that are left behind, regardless of what sort of payments they say that they're going to make. Barry says, whatever about the football lads, all the cons and shafting fans and genuinely ruining the sport and betraying the values on which the clubs were built, particularly United and Liverpool. Alex says, I'm one of those global fans, and yes, for years only United games mattered to me, but now I even follow the Vanarama National Conference. I love the tier system in the UK. Meanwhile, the Glazers don't own United, says Chris. They are merely custodians who will pass to another. United has always and will always belong to the fans that love it. Football is not based on greed, it is based on hope for a better day. Peter M then has been in touch to say, just forget the English teams and pay your €15 a week to see the nearest League of Ireland team. The more the fans, the more the money for the League of Ireland, and the more the standard will rise. And then Mikey says that he's a Liverpool fan. I will now be solely supporting my local amateur team if this Super League happens. It won't be Liverpool anymore. I hope others follow, but not holding my breath. That is just a sample of some of the huge reaction from you this morning. OTB AM is Off the Ball Sports Breakfast Show. It is live in association with Gillette every morning from 7:30. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Tomorrow morning we're going to be continuing this. We're going to maybe look abroad to see what the reaction in Spain has been like to this. Andy Mitten making an interesting point earlier on that it seems that the fans in Spain are a little more open to this. We're going to be talking about the return of the GAA as well and much more besides. Right now though, we're bringing you Pat Nevin, who was in conversation with Joe Malloy last night about José Mourinho and that Super League.
I'm absolutely frazzled. That's why I'm
overstimulated, frazzled.
My head's bursting, honestly. I don't know where I'm going just now. Yeah. I've been. I was down at doing the Chelsea game, Man City game, which was a big enough story in itself. And the next day I was at the Arsenal versus Fulham game, which is exciting because 7 minutes into injury time. Mm-hmm. I'm doing Chelsea tomorrow against. I'm down there for their game against Brighton, and none of that matters.
No.
You just think the bizarre world where José Mourinho getting sacked is hardly a story.
I know.
Extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary the way it's gone in the last couple of days.
We'll have to make a point to get to Mourinho, or to set aside a few minutes at the end of this chat for Mourinho, because there's every chance we'll run out of time. Monday Night Football seemed like an extraordinary old occasion. I don't know, did you watch much of it? But just to give people a sense of the tone as we kick off our conversation, you know, Dave Jones came on and, you know, evoked Prince William quotes and everything else, and it was real State of the Nation stuff here. And then Gary Neville, not surprisingly, if you saw him yesterday, he was every bit as angry, I think is the best word, as he was yesterday, this evening. So here's a little sense of Gary Neville, Pat, on Monday Night Football tonight.
It's difficult not to get emotional and feel sick, but honestly, you've got a right to your MPs, you've got your local football clubs, you've got a right, everybody's got to come behind this. Pundits for BBC, ITV, BT Sport, forget allegiances, forget who you support. We have got to come together to stop this proposal. This is an attack on everything that's been important in this country. Football has helped in the last 10 months in the midst of a pandemic more than ever keep people going. And they're trying to take it away from us. I feel slightly complicit. I've stayed pretty quiet in terms of the Glazer family over the years. Stayed pretty quiet because I've thought when the club were taken over as a PLC that you knew it could be bought and it was out of the control of players, of fans, of everybody. I believe in a free market, generally in life. And I've always thought, what's the answer to the Glazers? Who takes them out? Russia, China, state money for the 2 or 3 billion quid it would need. And I've stayed quiet on the basis that it's still Manchester United. I can still go and watch the lads play. I can be happy and I can be sad. I'm still watching football in this country. If they take dividends out, all right, it's dividends. I can live with it slightly. But what I can't live with is attacking every single football fan in this country. They have stepped over the mark. They are scavengers. And they need booting out of this football club and they need booting out of this country. And we have got to come together now. It might be too late. There'll be people at Manchester United, fans who were arguing 15 years ago who will say, it's too late. It's never too late. We have got to stop this. It is absolutely critical we do.
Gary Neville this evening on Monday Night Football, call to arms there. Did you watch that hour, Pat?
No, I was busy doing other interviews myself for other organisations.
Yeah.
So you don't. I mean, to be honest, I'm kind of happy not to listen to what other people say, because you have your own viewpoints on it and your own position on it, and it's kind of easy to be swayed and join in what becomes the norm. You have to have your own open viewpoints and your own reasons why you say and why you think actually things happen. The anger, I'm pretty happy about it. I'm pretty happy there's so much anger about, because football would have been gone had people not been angry about it. I can remember being roughly that angry when the Premier League started. I felt that way about the Premier League.
Right.
I was gutted with it. I thought, you slime balls, you're just kicking all those other clubs out of the way, and you're going to take the lion's share of the money, and they're going to be left in the gutter to try and survive in some difficult way. Yeah, I was right. It's no different now, is it? That's exactly what is happening now, but only on a world scale.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've kind of, that's the glazing over that I would feel slightly uncomfortable about. So, yeah, it's annoying, it's infuriating, it's nothing got to do with football. Football is a pure business of what's happening just now, or what they're trying to do just now. If indeed they are trying to do what we think they're trying to do, which I'm not absolutely convinced by. I still think it could be a bargaining chip.
Yeah.
They want to get more money out of UEFA. They want to get the Champions League working in their way. And this is a massive, I mean, this is the biggest game of poker you've ever seen. And by the way, they've just thrown everything out in the first hand, massive amount in the first hand. Because when you look at a variety of things, of the legality of it, of the people they haven't talked to yet. I mean, honestly, I know the power of the unions. I know the power of the players' union. I know the power of PFA, FIFPro. And now you spoke to them. I mean, what are you thinking about? These are the guys that's the members. would you do that with any organisation? I mean, going back to the newspapers in the 80s in the UK, you end up having riots on the street, etc., because you try to dump that and not going through the correct channels, or even make some semblance of an effort at going through the channels. So that's just one area. When you go into the legal ramifications of it, it's mental, it's bizarre. And by the way, anyone who tells you they understand it is lying, because they don't. Footballers are wealthy just now. Tell you what, Wales are going to be a lot wealthier over the next wee while. They're going to make some amount of money. I talk about that side of it, because see all the other sides of it, where we're all angry, and the fans are angry, and everyone who loves the game's angry, and all that sort of stuff. It's okay, that's part, I've done that, and I feel that. But where's that going to get us? I want to know why they're doing it. Why are you doing it now? Because it's easy to say, oh, it's just greed. Yeah, it's just greed. They're meant to want some of them, so why are you doing it if you... It must be other things on top of that. It must be other things on top of that. And I have just got a suspicion that from within that group, there's not one reasoning. There's a good number of reasonings for it. And some of them are not well thought out. Some of them are actually quite well thought out, and actually are, although I disagree with them intently, I actually partially understand them. Can I give you one example?
Please, give us a few.
Right, Barcelona.
Broke.
Look at their accounts for a while.
Yeah. Barcelona, I guess, yeah.
Net, right, so, and by the way, see if you're going to get any good again, you're going to have to go and spend that amount again. You're not getting that money. And by the way, the only way to get it, you can't even get it if you win the Champions League. You're not getting it that way.
No. Well, as a brief interruption, sorry, just to put this in context, just as a signing up fee, let alone the $4 billion they carve up every year thereafter, just as a signing up fee, they all get $350 million up front. Bayern, for winning the Champions League last year, got $90 million.
Exactly. And this is the point. So there's no point in shouting and bawling and screaming, but I think you must put yourself in their position so you understand the absolute reasons for doing it. They're not going to tell you the truth. They're going to say it's for the good of the game and it'll be a special competition. All that stuff. Right, just blanket. Right. You need to understand the reason why people are doing things. And of course it's the economy, stupid, right? That's always the answer. But why is it the answer? So if you're Barcelona, what do you do? So you're going to have to get out of this. Well, to get out of it is unthinkable, other than you go absolutely mental down this direction, right? So you've got yourself out of troubles. You've actually now saved yourself that you don't have to go and qualify anymore. You're secure in this little bubble, and there's no problems anymore. If you don't do that, you're up against sovereign states you cannot fight against financially, and you're stuffed, right? So what's your other options? Put yourself in that position. What's your options? Your option is to go and say, hello, China, anybody want to buy a club? You know, or else you go, you look at Roman Abramovich, he can't stay with these other ones. So it's an amazing amount of money that you have to get there. So if the likes of Barcelona don't do this, don't do something extreme, they could be gone, and certainly gone in the absolute upper echelons. They're a world-renowned club. You've got a huge fan base. It's all secondary.
Yeah.
And what if Real Madrid and all the others started up this Super League, and Barcelona, who we all thought were this purest of pure clubs, decided to say no? They're stuffed, because if all the money goes there, they're even worse position, unless they decide to redesign themselves as a more normal club, which, of course, I don't think the fans would accept either.
Yeah.
So go inside every single club and think why. I don't know the inside of Chelsea. By the way, I would think below chairman, chief exec and owner level, I don't think anyone in the clubs knows what the hell's going on. I don't think they do. I think this is so tiny little strata of and the upper echelon that's doing this. And whether they've taken good enough advice from various areas, who knows? It doesn't sound like it to me. But you look at someone like, I say Chelsea, but I don't know what's going on there. What happens if something happened to Roman Abramovich tomorrow? What happens to that club? I mean, in all seriousness, what actually happens? It is frightening, isn't it? If you are in charge of that, or try to run that, or try to keep that going to any sort of level, it's wild, man, what could happen. So that's just two off the top of my head. You could go through others and think, And the other one is, if you're the classic left, you're the guy standing on the platform when the train leaves, kind of thing, right? That stuff as well. Don't think, it's just greed, and close your mind. And don't just go pure anger either. Try and understand it, because you'll not beat these people unless you understand where they're coming from. I think there's a lot of desperation there.
Oh, totally.
I also think there's a big poker game.
Yeah, I agree as well. I can't get that angry about it because I do think it's a poker game. And I do think ultimately UEFA and the Dirty Dozen, as Alexander Sefrin has called them, will sit down. And I wouldn't be surprised if these 12 and maybe one or two others have guaranteed places in the new expanded Champions League. Like, the big news today was that the current new Champions League reforms mean that there are 2 places held back for teams who don't qualify automatically. That is kind of interesting that already in their back pocket, UEFA are having to acknowledge that, okay, a Man United or a Juventus or one of the big boys with lots of big fan base, Barcelona, have a horror season. Look, we'll sneak you in the Champions League in this new format. That's kind of interesting that's happened. So I suspect that's the middle ground they're all heading to, because it's very clear Man City are fine and PSG are fine, and most of the others are kind of crippled by this arms race that they can't keep up with. So they're desperate and they're happy to go along with this. And the Americans are like, hang on, how are we meant to organise our business when we don't know if we have 25% of our revenue until the top 4 places are guaranteed? I mean, they come from a different world where, relegation in John Henry's world and the Glazers' world is not making the Champions League. Like, this is the relegation they're talking about, not the Premier League. So, all the different interests are swirling around for sure. So, I mean, how does the game of poker end? Like, I presume Premier League aren't going to kick them out, surely. UEFA.
I'm supposed to go to the Chelsea Real Madrid game next week. I don't know if I'm going yet. You just no idea, because they're talking about kicking.
Well, that could happen Friday. Yeah, Friday. Yeah. The Danish UEFA member Jesper Møller says Chelsea, Man City, Real Madrid out of the Champions League Friday. Same for Arsenal, Man United in the Europa League. So that's swirling. Apparently, the threat of banning them from international football for Euro 2020 will not hold up. So Euro 2020 is safe, and then, I guess Qatar and the courts is a different matter. If they want to keep them out of the World Cup, who knows?
Do you know someone pulls out a knife? You pull out a knife, or they pull out a gun, you pull out a gun. Someone pulls out a nuclear warhead, you pull out a nuclear warhead. That's where we are. The thing is, they've not gone through the steps first. They've just gone straight nuclear. Yeah. And that's where we are. And that's what's so shocking about it. In a way, you almost feel, and I don't know if they're this clever, they've thought, let's skip all those other steps and just let's get to the business end of this argument and go as extreme as you possibly can. The problem with these kind of nuclear standoffs, somebody better back down and someone better blink at some point in time. Because if they don't, the destruction that could happen around it is extraordinary to the entire world game of football. It is absolutely unthinkable and extraordinary what could actually happen to it. The amount of people I've talked to or listened to, or the consideration of what I think could happen, doesn't bear thinking about. It really doesn't bear thinking about.
So give me a sense of that, because this is, and prepared to be shot down, I'm sure, but like the experience, for instance, of an Irish fan who in the main supports United or Liverpool and maybe one of the other big 6 that are moving, their day-to-day experience of supporting the club is not going to change. They'll still watch Champions League and the Super League, they'll get better games, they'll hopefully still be in the Premier League, and that's all fine. Like they're talking about.
You say that.
Yeah. So go on, hit me. What's the devastation?
Well, what if they're not allowed in the Champions League and then some of the Super League, and then the Premier League say, right, we're not having it, and the Premier League no get out. Premier League say no, get out. And this happened to me oddly enough, and in a much smaller way. It felt big at the time, but it was a much smaller way. I was in Scotland, and I was the chief executive at Motherwell, right? And Celtic and Rangers told everybody they wanted to move to England. And I sat there in the meeting with the other 10 saying, tell them to get stuff done. Tell them to go. Like, what if they go? They're going nowhere. They've nowhere to go. England won't touch them with a barge pole. I happen to have some contacts down there.
Right.
They're going nowhere. We have actually got a bigger gun than them just now. We just don't know it. And are we going to be brave enough to do this? Because what happens if they do go? Where are they going to go? Right? You're going to Belgium or something like that? All right, on you go. What will our league become? Now, please do not take this personally, but it was just the phrase that was used at the time. We will become like the League of Ireland, i.e. partially semi-professional, etc. And I said, well, you don't know. But is it actually any worse than you are at the moment? And where you could be if you go to what they want, actually, because they wanted something like 95% of all television monies just to stay. In the end, I just said, no, still a minute. It doesn't matter. Because there comes to a point where you know, I've actually got nothing to lose. And I actually think that's where the Premier League are just now.
Right.
You lose those top 6 and they go and play in the Super League and then throw in a kind of half team for your Premier League and don't really care about it because it isn't getting them qualification for anywhere, then their product, it's not dead, but it's completely diminished. And if television companies then go and follow the Super League and don't follow the Premier League and don't give them the same monies, the Premier League might as well just say, oh, get stuffed, get lost. They might as well say it. Because I actually don't think they'll have that much to lose. What do you want? Man United's B team or just tell Man United to go and get lost?
Well, it's an interesting point. I mean, Man United's B team will still be pretty damn good if they're getting 350 million and then carving up the 3-4 billion.
Will you do that? Have you ever seen football work like that? What you do is you get top heavy and everything goes top heavy. You look at the money that's been spent on all the squads just now. Some of them still haven't enough players.
Yeah.
Have a look at the money they're spending.
Yeah.
Have a look at Barcelona. The money they're spending, and have a look at when 3 or 4 guys get injured. What you've got, it just gets top heavy. It's the nature of that beast, and that's exactly what they do. So
you think that if it comes to, and this for me, this could be the real deciding issue. If it comes to Premier League sitting across the table from these 6, and say the other 14 clubs are there, you think the 6 blink first? You think they can't risk being turfed out?
I don't know who's brave enough. I don't know. That's the point I'm making. The 6 might blink, the 14 might blink. Nightmare scenario, neither does. And that's a possibility. And that is the horror, you know, and it's back to the Cuban Missile Crisis. You're thinking, somebody better blink here, because we're all going to get stuffed if they don't. And that's why, you know, for mutual self-interest, they probably will. They'll find a way. There'll be a backdoor that they'll find a way of doing it. But that's a long way down the line. We've got a lot of stuff to go through before we get to that point. Just all the stuff that we're going to have to go through, and all the name calling, and all the vicious stuff, and all the legal bits that are going to happen over the next wee while.
Yeah.
We're going to have to go through all that first. And I follow it, and I'm sure we all follow it, but I want to know where we end up after this. And if I think you and I are probably quite close together here. I think we'll end up with those big clubs get a bit more than they have at the moment from the Champions League, and move on.
Well, in 2018, I mean, Scudamore gave the top 6 a bigger share of the TV money, you know, and so they're used to kind of getting their way, and they're now at a point where they're in the habit of others acknowledging, well, we're the main show in town, we're bringing in all the eyeballs, so we should start getting some more money. There was one last point before I wanted to hit on Mourinho, and so look, this is in terms of like football is for the fans and all these banners, like Leeds United came out tonight in like football is for the fans t-shirts, and the fans are protesting and they're talking about how our game is being stolen. How would this situation, as proposed by the European Super League, change the lives of fans at all? Like, fans are already being screwed. You know, Sky Sports led the charge over the last 2 days and charged fans their 60, 70, 80 euro per month for the privilege of watching them do so. Fixtures and kick-off times are at stupid o'clock for fans travelling on a Tuesday evening from one end of the country to another. Tickets are going up. Increasingly, tourists are filling Premier League grounds. Young people can't afford to go to games. It's one of the reasons atmospheres aren't as good. Like, this notion that fans had it pretty good up until now, I mean, that ship has sailed a long time ago. Genuinely, apart from maybe like an Everton trying to build this stadium with dreams of getting into the Champions League and make it big, and Leicester having to look at Arsenal saying, you know, thanks for everything the last couple of years, Leicester, we're going to head back into Europe now. Aside from those kind of couple of unique sets of fans like the Leicesters or whatever, or Everton, like how is this bad for fans? How is like the fans' life transformed by this happening?
I think the fans now know that they don't count anywhere near as much as they thought they did.
But how could they think they counted?
No, they thought they counted a bit. And you go to any of the big grounds and they're passionate. It's their club. Every fan will tell you it's our club. And there's guys up the top of the club saying, no, it's not, it's ours. We'll do what we like with it. What they need to figure out, what they need to understand now is, right, it's just a numbers game, right? It's purely a numbers game. It's a finance numbers game. If the fans here aren't getting treated particularly well, they can either like it or lump it. Where is the real money? Well, the real money's in China. Yeah. The real money's in India. It's in the Americas. It's those global eyes. Now, this product, and excuse me for talking in their language, but I was schooled in it. This product isn't as good when it hasn't got those fans, or that noise, or that atmosphere. They might have to pipe in noise like we are at the moment, so it becomes sellable for those other markets. When you consider the size of those markets and when you do the sums in those markets, and you do that in the consideration that those clubs are frightened that they can't actually hang on to this Ferrari that's roaring away from them. If you look at it in those terms, you realise the fans are important. Yeah. But it's the ones in Africa and it's the ones in China. Sure. It's those ones, because there's billions of them.
And which fans here have more right to feel disenfranchised? Like, are you saying Liverpool fans or United fans feel like, oh, they've betrayed me?
Can I say one thing? And this is the love and the joy of football. Yeah. And it's not worked great. There's always a team for you. You know, if you don't like Manchester United, there's that other team that set up out of the ashes. Sure. They said, they refused to do it. If you
I'm sorry, I got that. This leverage buyout, and the Glazers have milked the club, and they're everything that's wrong. So, but do you, when you're seeing all the banners now, football is for the fans, like, have Man United fans been betrayed, or Liverpool fans been betrayed by this European Super League? I don't really get that.
Well, the thing is, they have been, if what they are sold is then a pup. It's actually this sterile, stale, unchanging system that they go and play the same teams time after time after time after time. And then the product that they really enjoyed, the domestic one, is some really thin gruel, and they don't enjoy it anymore. That's when you're stuffed. That's when, and then, by the way, you're still expected to turn up in your 30 and 40 and 50,000s and go mad. It's something that's quite clearly been given to you as second class, and you've spent your money on this. Okay,
so the betrayal is what it does to the domestic game.
Yeah, I think it has a real chance of doing that. And by the other betrayal is if you are of any national persuasion at all, what it could do to the international game as well. I mean, that's a whole different thing. So there's a whole bunch of areas where I think the fan will not feel the same. And there's a lot of people who are pushed to the edge at the moment. There's too much football on the telly as it is. I mean, I love football. I work in the thing. I can't watch all the games.
No, I hear you.
Wouldn't watch all the games. And that's somebody who's like bathed in it. And I can't, I'm not the only one. Everyone's very, very similar. We're in lockdown now, so we've been saturated with it. When we come out of this, it's a different world. And those people who have done the Super League, if you tell me they know how to figure everything out, know how everything's going to go forward, well done, because you've not figured out the reaction to this. You got that first bit wrong. True. So there's a fair chance you've got other bits wrong down the line, which are only subjective guesses anyway.
I guess, look, maybe it's through the job or whatever, where you have to take more of a sober-eyed view of things. But I mean, this, for instance, this means more Liverpool business compared to their treatment of residents around Anfield. I mean, are you kidding me? Like, what illusion people operating under? I mean, it's like
little cliches like that. They sound like sometimes advertising campaigns. I've spent a lot of time working them up, and I'm not saying it absolutely is the case. And sometimes, like the People's Club at Everton, I go for it.
Yeah.
But to be fair, I'm a wee bit wary of pithy slogans.
Yeah. Okay, look, we'll be talking about this for a while. That's the other thing. I mean, it's all shiny and exciting today. I mean, when we're into month 7 of this, it's going to feel like Brexit, Pat. So we'll park it there. Oh my God.
It's trying to think. I mean, I've been talking for since the moment it came, I've been talking about it. And right at the start, there's quite a few things I was saying. I thought, that's kind of original. I don't think anyone said that. Quite a few things, my angles on it. And there's no way I'm going to be able to keep it up, mate.
No.
It's going to be, and so everything's going to be taken to every little point. But what's going to be intriguing, I'll tell you what's intriguing next. They're going to have to pick at the 14 or whatever. Oh, no, the 12. They're going to have to pick it.
Divide and conquer.
See if you pick one away.
Yeah.
And that just falls away. There's a crumbling state there.
Well, it's interesting. Philippe Auclair was on earlier, and he reckoned Barcelona are already wavering. Now, I had thought, given their financial situation, they'd be front of the queue. So who knows? Who knows what will happen?
Yeah, that's what happens in these things.
Yeah.
Because unless you've got a whole bunch of people who have got exactly the same needs, thoughts, feelings about it, and that's not the case. 100% not the case. Unless that is the case. And some were very, very less keen on being involved up front, and not saying they were dragged into it, but they felt as if they couldn't not do it in case they missed out. You just need one of them to crumble, and the whole thing will look much, much weaker.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved